Hey guys, tonight we step straight into the squelching heart of California's 1850 gold rush. Boots sinking and spirits soaring. As you, yes you, arrive in a town so new the paint on the saloon sign is still dripping down the post. The main road is less a road and more an improvised canal of thawing mountain snow, horse droppings, and very ambitious mud. There's gold in them hills, they say. But right now there's mostly mud in your socks, your cuffs, and probably your future. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're at it, drop a quick comment telling me your city and the oddly specific hour you're keeping me company tonight. Bonus points if your clock reads something like 3:17 a.m. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You swing down from the rocking stagecoach, leather satchel thumping against your hip, and immediately your boots are swallowed by brownie batter sludge. It makes a delighted suction sound. Schlurp, and when you yank one foot free the other sinks deeper, as though the earth itself is auditioning to keep souvenirs. Your fellow passengers scatter up the warped plank sidewalk, but you pause, staring at the horizon where ragged tents sparkle like tin confetti under a pewter sky. The Sierra Nevada loom behind them, snowy peaks pretending to be civilized. What the hand-tinted lithographs back east never mentioned is the aroma, an aggressive fusion of wet wool, pipe smoke, and optimism gone slightly sour. Barrels overflow with something that might once have been beans. Bottles crunch under wagon wheels, and the air thrums with 40 different languages all trying to buy the same shovel. A 9-year-old streaks past waving a quartz rock the size of your fist, shouting, 2 ounces for a nickel, mister. His accent is Bavarian, his confidence pure frontier. You're not entirely sure which part of the offer is illegal. Welcome to Hangtown. Population officially 500 souls. Unofficially, however many can squeeze between sunrise and the next bout of dysentery. By the end of 1850 the U.S. Census will show California has tripled in residents, fastest demographic explosion in American history to that point. But the ledger you care about is strictly personal. You haven't come to dig. The mere sight of those pickaxes makes your shoulders ache. You've come to clean other people's shirts, and you're about to learn that's dirtier work than mining itself. First order of business. Lodging. A sign painted in flaking red letters advertises beds, or something like M. Inside, the proprietor, a woman with bread-kneading biceps, rents you half a straw tick for $3 a night. Full ticks 6, linens extra, she warns, tapping her ledger like a telegraph key. You fork over the coins, reasoning that if miners pay $16 for a single pair of boots, you can splurge on partial comfort. The real investment will be the washtub you haven't yet acquired. Night settles like soot, and the stars show up sharp enough to slice. Somewhere a fiddle saws out Old Dan Tucker, collapses mid-riff when the player sneezes, and then valiantly continues. You're too wired to sleep, yet exhaustion eventually crowds in like uninvited poker players. Lying on your half-mattress, you listen to the town breathe, snoring, clinking, arguing about claim boundaries no wider than a mule's shadow. Historians still debate whether those hurriedly sketched property lines genuinely reduced violence or merely redirected it to different saloons. Dawn greets you with the smell of overboiled chicory and a choir of crows stationed on telegraph poles that won't have wires for another 2 years. Any day begun ankle-deep in muck must be met with determination and an extra layer of sarcasm. You march to Market Street, where vendors hawk everything from hardtack to hair tonic, and start hunting for the shiniest tool in the American West. A tin washtub. The best bargain is a dented oval basin currently doubling as a drum for 2 sailors turned jug band musicians. You flash a silver quarter. They confer in hushed pirate dialect and finally surrender their percussion instrument. The drummer salutes. May your socks be whiter than your lies, friend. A blessing, an omen, perhaps both. Soap proves trickier. Lie cakes are shipped around Cape Horn, a voyage so long sailors routinely disembark married to their beards. By arrival, half have melted into foul-smelling bricks journalists describe as calcified nightmares. Prices soar. 1 cake can cost $2, roughly a miner's daily wage. Salvation arrives in the form of a Cantonese merchant selling camellia oil soap cured with rice ash. Through a flurry of gestures, he explains it leaves silk bright without dissolving the silk. Scholars later argue about the exact recipe, some claiming secret additives like ground lotus root. You, more practically, sniff the floral note struggling past lanolin and pay in silver. With a rope sling, the washtub rides your back like a proud turtle shell as you trek creekward. Mud splashes jealousy up your trousers. Its way of reminding you it still owns this town. Water acquisition is pure slapstick. Walk half a mile, fill bucket, walk back through quicksand consistency sludge, spill half, repeat. A group of prospectors argue over who scooped water first. One man cites maritime salvage law. The others stare like he's reciting Ovid. Academic papers a century later will still debate whether any official rules governed creek access or if it was just sharp elbows all the way down. You claim a flattish granite slab as your workstation. Tub on one boulder, soap perched like a smug frog, garments sprawled over sun-warmed stones. Your first customer arrives before you can roll up your sleeves. A Chilean miner with a grin wider than his pickaxe swing. He drops a bundle emitting aromas that violate natural law. Sweat, pork fat, and something archaeologists might one day classify. He wants the lot washed by sundown. Payment. A pinch of gold dust he swears weighs exactly a quarter ounce. You accept, mostly because holding your breath that long deserves hazard pay. Work begins. You plunge a shirt into creek water so cold your hands forget they have nerves. Lacking a washboard, you use the ribbed rock surface. Soap foams beneath your knuckles. Suds drift downstream like tiny lost clouds. A trout rises, gulps a bubble, and retreats unimpressed. You hum the churn and butter tune your grandmother favored and wonder what she'd make of this frontier chaos. Probably that you undercharged. Mid-scrub, a passing fiddler shifts to Hangtown races. And you adopt the rhythm. Scrub scrub rinse, scrub scrub rinse. Lunch is jerky and creek water, filtered through optimism rather than science. After all, Pasteur hasn't yet suggested germs exist. Another mainstream fact. Most illnesses here get blamed on bad air. You raise a toast to not inhaling. Your second client, an Irishman sunburned until his freckles resemble constellations, produces 3 pairs of wool drawers that could apply for statehood. He offers payment in a lucky horseshoe nail reputed to repel snakes. You counteroffer real money or at least drinkable liquor. He eventually adds 2 silver half-dimes. Economists later list such barter microtransactions as proof the gold rush economy was fluid to the point of absurdity. Sunset paints the sky tangerine when you wring the last shirt. Fingers pruned, shoulders ablaze, you nonetheless clutch a tidy pile of dust wrapped in paper and coins that jingle like applause. Before basking, a shotgun blast cracks uptown, followed by the crash of a saloon window and an indignant mule bray. Apparently, town life shifts from commerce to chaos the moment daylight clocks out. Back at the lodging house, the proprietor inspects your damp bundles, then grudgingly lets you use the communal line. An irony you savor. Sheets hang like ghosts rehearsing. You pin shirts among them, whispering apologies for their ordeal. Supper is 75 cents. Beans boiled beyond recognition and coffee potent enough to peel paint. Over tin plates, a toothless fellow brags about finding a gold pocket big enough to choke a mule. Others roll eyes. Folklore circulates of an albino grizzly stealing pies. Historians still argue whether one was ever documented or if tired eyes just saw snow on fur. Night deepens. Overhead, the Milky Way spills like flour on black slate. Tomorrow will bring more mud, more sweat, maybe more gold dust. Statisticians will later calculate fewer than 1 in 20 miners turned a profit, while service providers, blacksmiths, bartenders, laundryfolk, often did better. You're wagering on that math. You draft a business plan, build clientele, hire an assistant, invest in a bigger cauldron. Rumor says a woman in Sacramento charges $16 per dozen pieces. You vow to match her by summer. Ambition warms better than blankets. At midnight, a downstairs argument in rapid Spanish escalates into forced furniture rearrangement. A gunshot punctures the ceiling 6 feet from your nose. Plaster snow drifts down. Silence, then a door slam, then the boarding house dog resumes snoring. You notice your heart merely jogged. Apparently the frontier recalibrates panic thresholds overnight. Dawn number 2. Muscles protest but profit beckons. A blacksmith, rumored to have shoot a pig once, offers a battered copper cauldron for $10 cash, payable in 2 installments and endless praise. You agree, praising him in advance. Firewood proves dearer. Nearby forests are logged ragged. A lumberjack claiming to be a senator's illegitimate son trades a week's supply for laundering his flannel collection, which smells like it moonlights as raccoon housing. You accept. Sanitation is your brand now. Back at the creek you build a stone fire pit, perch the cauldron atop, and fill it. Soap shreds swirl. Steam coils skyward scented faintly of camellias and minerals. Another laundress sets up upstream. Towhead, grin sharp as an axe. She hums a hymn about crossing Jordan. You counter with a sea shanty mashup. Competition, sure, but polite so far. Your Chilean miner returns, astonished at the resurrected whiteness. He tips extra gold flake. Smells like Santiago. You wonder which district of Santiago smells of camellia and adrenaline but accept graciously. Word spreads faster than grease on water. There's a washer who returns garments in the same number he receives them. Soon, a queue forms, 2 Germans, a Mohawk scout, and a Methodist preacher whose robe hosts geological strata. You log names, items, due dates, plus notes like tips well or owns mule, smells of onions. Administration is half the battle, elbow grease is the other half. Over beans that evening, you overhear debate about California's looming statehood vote. Some fear taxes will strangle margins. Others crave legal order over vigilante committees. Modern historians cite these tavern arguments as grassroots previews of national political realignments. You mostly worry whether a state laundry tax might chew your profits. Back in bed, you tally the day. Income equivalent to $5 gold. Not bad. You slide coins beneath your pillow, a crude alarm system, and whisper to the trusty tub. Tomorrow we conquer another tide of grime. The tub, dignified as ever, says nothing. Sleep drags you into dreams where muddy streets become oceans and shirts turn into jellyfish. A brass band of frogs in miner helmets charges 50 cents per croak. You wake before paying and decide that's good business. Dawn number 3 bites with wind cold enough to file protest letters down your spine. A damp towel becomes a scarf. The boarding house door now sports a literal laundry list, naming you, the rival woman, and a newcomer rumored to import French detergent pellets. Competition breeds ingenuity, you remind yourself. You stride creekward early to claim the flattest rock. Chinese miners performing slow calisthenics pause. One smiles, offers green tea from a pewter pot. You trade a sliver of camellia soap. He pockets it like a talisman and wishes you luck in Mandarin you half understand. Anthropologists later label such exchanges prime examples of multicultural barter networks on the frontier. At the water's edge, frost rims your cauldron. You coax birch bark tinder to life. Steam rises with your resolve. Today you will wash, bargain, maybe even sing. Above all, you will survive this mud-strangled miracle of a town. Somewhere beyond the mountains, whispers of your pristine collars will ripple outward like rings in a basin until perhaps, just perhaps, you become the legend every miner secretly wishes to visit after a month in the diggings. The laundryman who made white look like hope. That, you decide, is worth another cracked knuckle or 2. Your first full week in Hangtown unspools like thread from an overwound spool. Ragged, tense, but stubbornly continuous. By the 7th sunrise you've decided that the borrowed creek rock, however picturesque, is no place to build a dynasty of soap and suds. Rain clouds squat on the ridgeline and threaten to dissolve your entire business model with one leisurely downpour. You need a roof, a stove that doesn't tip when the wind sneezes, and, most crucially, a washtub that hasn't been repurposed as a percussion instrument by every homesick sailor west of St. Louis. So you stride toward Commerce Alley, really a gap between 2 hastily nailed clapboard stores, where the local notice board titters in the breeze, plastered with bills for everything from patent medicines to lost mules with trust issues. One ink-blotted scrap catches your eye. For rent. Stout tin tub, no holes, modest leak around seem easily ignored. Includes corner shack, 1 cot, 3-legged stove. The asking price is $13 a month, payable in either coin or any metal of equal enthusiasm. You track the landlord to a canvas-roofed counting office that smells like pine pitch and mild panic. He's a lanky Vermonter whose beard could host wintering songbirds. Leaning across his desk, you adopt the poker face you practiced in the boarding house mirror. 13 seems steep, you say, fingers drumming an imaginary abacus. Holes may be absent, but leaks are just holes in disguise. The Vermonter's eyebrow peaks. He counters, 12 if you patch the seam yourself, 10 if you pay 2 months in advance. He taps a ledger so water-stained its ink resembles migrating geese. You feign a wince worthy of Greek tragedy and dig out a neat cloth packet of gold dust and coin. The week's earnings minus enough for breakfast and your ongoing relationship with caffeine. After a theatrical sigh, you agree on 10, pay 20 up front, and insist on a receipt. He scribbles 1, each letter leaning like it's dodging responsibility. Deal done, he presses a rusty key into your palm. Shack secured, you fetch your modest gear, tub, soap slivers, the newly acquired copper cauldron, and march to your commercial destiny. The building sits at the alley's far end, wedged between a gambling tent and a stable whose clientele whinny all night about oats and existential dread. The structure tilts slightly north as though eager to greet the pole star. Still, it boasts a real door, a window with half the glass intact, and, miracle of miracles, a plank floor elevated a respectable 6 inches above mud level. Inside, cobwebs fold themselves like origami cranes over rafters. The previous tenant has left behind a pile of buckskin scraps, 2 empty turpentine bottles, and what might once have been a cat toy or a political pamphlet. You sweep, you scrub, you mutter motivational slogans, and by noon the place looks almost fit for human occupancy, if the human in question doesn't mind a bit of extra ventilation through the roof's accidental skylight. Next hurdle, patching the tub seam. You recall your uncle's barnyard wisdom, that a mix of beeswax and pine resin can seal anything except a banker's conscience. After an hour's scavenging, you barter a wedge of wax from a German candlemaker and a chunk of resin scraped off a lumber wagon. Over the stove's timid flame you melt them together, then smear the goo along the tub's interior like frosting an unusually depressing cake. It cools to a golden seam that smells faintly of Christmas. You test with 2 buckets of water, only a politely timed drip escapes, easily caught in a saucepan you label bonus rinse. With infrastructure solidifying, you turn to advertising. A sign is imperative. Borrowing charcoal from the blacksmith, you sketch on a scrap of canvas. Clean clothes, sharper than your poker face. Laundry here. Fair prices, quiet judgment. You nail it above the door just as a gust threatens to javelin you into the stable. The sign flaps but stays, your pride puffs like a bellows. The first customer of the new, roofed era is a prospector from the Sandwich Islands, Hawaiian lineage, English vocabulary peppered with lyrical vowels. He carries a calico shirt dyed indigo by design and rusty brown by neglect. He studies your setup, the tub now gleaming in the dim light, and offers a pearl button as down payment. You raise an eyebrow. He produces 2 more buttons and a small shell cameo. Fashion historians will later marvel that Pacific adornments occasionally circulated as quasi-currency this far inland. In the moment you simply weigh prettiness against fuel costs and nod agreement. By afternoon a queue snakes down the alley. A Bavarian accordionist whose suspenders might walk away if unmonitored. A Mexican vaquero brandishing leather chaps caked with dreams and dust. And a Swedish baker in flour-stained trousers who swears each stain commemorates a perfect loaf. You set prices. 50 cents for shirts, 75 for trousers, negotiable if the odor threatens local wildlife. Most pay without argument. One fellow grumbles until you remind him a new shirt back east costs $2 plus postage that may never arrive. Economics 101. Scarcity inflates value faster than a gold pan fills with hope. Between loads you inventory soap. The camellia batch dwindles, so you dabble in homemade lye, wood ash steeped in rainwater dripping from your skylight into a pickle barrel. Standard practice? Yes, but risky. Misjudged alkalinity can chew fabric faster than a fever chews a prospector's resolve. You test patches on scrap cotton. One fizzles into lace, another survives intact. Chemistry on the frontier is equal parts science and confessional prayer. The mainstream fact here, well documented even in penny dreadfuls, is that accidental soap burns were a leading cause of laundry losses. You jot ratios in a notebook for future you who will pretend this was always the plan. Evening brings the first official tally. $8 profit after wood, water rights, and an emergency pastry to bribe the Swedish baker into silence about your initial water spillage. $8 in one day, twice the wage of a pick-swinging miner who actually finds something shiny. You treat yourself to lamp oil and a tin flute from a peddler. Music, you reason, proves you're still civilized. Or at least makes the stove less lonely. Out on the boardwalk lanterns flicker like fireflies too stubborn to migrate. The gambling tent beside you erupts in cheers, then groans. Apparently someone forgot that 3 queens do not beat a straight flush. Chips clatter, arguments blossom, but miraculously no shots ring out. Statistics later compiled by territorial judges will show that despite popular myth, most disputes ended with insults rather than gunfire, though the latter made better headlines. Before bed you polish the tub seam again, feeling oddly parental. Ownership glows inside you. The tub is no longer a rented vessel but an accomplice, a conspiracy to remain solvent. You drift asleep to a chorus of horses, accordion warm-ups, and the wind rattling your grateful shingles. At breakfast, the boarding house beans now a recurring character. You overhear 2 locals debating whether California's looming state constitution should outlaw foreign miners' taxes. One cites Article 11. The other retorts with an impromptu limerick about bureaucrats. Political scientists a century hence will still argue exactly how such dusty dialogues influenced the final document. You decide politics can wait until soap supply is secure. Mid-morning a wiry man from Virginia City barrels in, clutching a bolt of canvas so stiff it could stand sentry. He proposes a trade. You launder his 40-pound tent in return for exclusive rights to wash garments from his entire mining syndicate, 30 men deep in quartz and deeper in grime. The catch: you must finish by Sunday when they haul supplies north. That's 70 shirts, 45 trousers, miscellaneous long johns, essentially enough fabric to parachute a mule. You hesitate exactly 2 seconds before accepting. Logistics time. Water. Quadruple your normal quota, even if it means paying the creekside water warden, who has started charging a penny per pail maintenance fee, despite maintaining nothing but a smug grin. Wood. Negotiate with the lumberjack again. Offer half-price washing of his flannels plus a jug of raisin whiskey you acquire from a passing peddler. Soap. Insufficient. You recall rumored soap stores in Chinatown 2 towns over. Without hesitation you hitch a ride on a freight wagon, exchanging labor for passage. 4 hours of reorganizing crates labeled iron nails, maybe, and canned peaches, definitely not nails. Chinatown welcomes you with lanterns swaying like ruby planets and the smell of star anise drifting over cabbage. In a narrow shop lined floor to ceiling with blue porcelain jars, you meet Master Huang, chemist and entrepreneur. He listens to your plight, nods sympathetically, and produces rectangular cakes stamped with dragons. Ingredients: pork fat, rice ash, chrysanthemum oil. He demonstrates its strength by dabbing a smear onto a copper coin. Seconds later the metal gleams. You whistle low. He smiles, quoting a price in rapid Cantonese. The clerk translates. 12 cents per cake if you buy in bulk. You try not to gape, nearly half San Francisco rates. A handshake later, sealing a deal some historians will later consider a significant node in cross-cultural commerce networks. You load 40 cakes into burlap and splurge on a sesame bun for the road. Back by moonrise, you launch Operation Syndicate Suds. The stove roars like a locomotive, water roils, and steam fills the shack until your hair curls into humidity-drunk ringlets. You arrange a relay. While one batch soaks, another boils. A third drips dry on ropes strung from rafters like surrendered flags. Your tin flute sings accompaniments between loads, turning drudgery into an accidental concert. At hour 4 a miner arrives to check progress, raising eyebrows at your personal typhoon alley of linen. Thought you'd drown, he jokes. You grin, flicking sweat from your brow. Laundry's wetter than mining, but at least it pays. He laughs, tosses a silver dollar tip into the air. A perfect arc, a clink, gone into the earnings jar. Not bad for comedic timing. By dawn Sunday, every garment hangs crisp and orderly, a miracle considering the shack's square footage rivals that of a respectable wardrobe trunk. You present the haul to the syndicate foreman. He counts, inspects, even sniffs, then pronounces satisfaction in a voice like gravel poured over vellum. Payment follows. A leather pouch heavy with coarse gold flakes and, unexpectedly, 3 small emeralds found lodged in ancient riverbank clay. Gemologists will someday argue whether such finds were freak occurrences or evidence of a broader, undocumented gemstone rush. After the wagons depart, you collapse on the cot, counting haul and bruises. 12 hours rest feels earned. Yet your mind cartwheels with possibility. With this capital you could commission a wooden washboard, perhaps import one of those newfangled centrifugal wringers demonstrated at the 1849 New York Fair, though eyewitness accounts vary on whether it mangled more shirts than it dried. Innovation sings to you like a distant banjo. You push aside dreams of machinery to confront immediate reality. The divider between shack and gambling tent is a single plank thick. When their piano thunders ragtime, your glassware tap dances. Tonight, after a particularly wild streak, a chair leg punctures your wall. The offender apologizes through the hole and offers a free drink coupon good until dawn. You accept the plank as unintended ventilation and chalk it up to frontier remodeling. Building codes are still a gleam in Sacramento's eye. By midweek, you've become a local fixture. Kids escort travelers past your door chanting, "Clean clothes this way, smell goes that way." One afternoon the town constable, badge polished like a second sun, brings his parade uniform for special treatment. The cuffs carry red dust from last month's posse ride. He swears the stains are evidence of civic duty, though rumor says he got lost chasing his own horse. You vow to keep the red but tame the grime, a balancing act tailors call honor laundering. That evening he returns just as you finish. Uniform spotless yet heroic patina intact. He beams and pays in minted gold coins, rare birds among all this raw dust. He also grants you an informal guarantee. Anyone who robs your establishment gets free lodging in his jail. Whether that promise holds water remains untested, but the symbolism spruces your sleep. Amid success, you guard against complacency. Each night you jot expenses and earnings, noting fluctuations in soap prices. An emerging pattern. Every supply ship delayed by storms spikes soap 20%. You consider stockpiling like a beaver hoards sticks. Economists will later label such decisions nascent supply chain savvy, though right now it just feels like common sense. Quirky revelation of the week. Miners sometimes dissolve flecks of gold in nitric acid to test purity, then throw the acid out behind tents. That runoff can whiten fabric better than lemon juice, if it doesn't first vaporize the cloth. You try a microscopic experiment on a scrap hanky. Result: a dazzling white dot surrounded by a scorched halo. Modern chemistry syllabi cite similar mishaps when discussing early industrial bleaching. You file it under death wish shortcuts, decline politely. Saturday brings the Sabbath crowd, preachers, Quakers, and skeptics who attend services mainly to nap in pews. Lace collars, stiff bonnets, and black suits queue at your shack door. A rabbi visiting from New York offers to exchange a Hebrew primer for laundering his silk talith. You accept. Language lessons beat tumbleweeds for conversation. Over suds you mumble Aleph Bet, surprising passersby who assume you've invented a new method of stain exorcism. Curriculum developers far in the future will point to such frontier cross-pedagogy as evidence of informal adult education's deep American roots. During a rare break you step outside and witness miners auctioning off a single bar of scented French soap. Opening bid $7. Final price $12. Audience cheers at the extravagance like Romans at the Colosseum. You realize, with a jolt that rattles your molars, that soap is not merely a tool. It's a symbol. In a place where everything is filthy, cleanliness is a luxury signaling success. Possessing quality soap is social currency, maybe political leverage. You vow to corner that market before the town barber figures it out. You draft a plan. Build a small still to render animal fat from the butcher's leftovers. Combine with hardwood ash to produce barrels of frontier-grade lye soap. If you can cut imports by half, you'll underprice competitors and still double margin. a local tanner, up to his elbows in deer hides, agrees to supply fat in exchange for laundering his work aprons, which currently register on the olfactory spectrum as apocalyptic. Environmental historians will later debate whether such micro-industries accelerated deforestation and river pollution or simply piggybacked on already rampant extraction. Debate aside, you're busy ordering iron molds from a traveling smith. That night, as the moon tattoos silver bands across the alley, you stand outside inhaling crisp pine-scented air, miraculously upwind of the stable. A fiddle twangs inside the gambling tent. Across the street, a poet declaims to nobody about the duality of fortune. You brush soap dust from your sleeves and feel, for one flicker, an equal participant in this chaotic symphony rather than mere observer. A sudden bout of laughter erupts from 3 Chinese laundrymen passing by, carrying baskets twice their body mass. They nod respectfully, professional courtesy, and one whispers, "Good seam," pointing at your patched tub. You grin. Artisans recognize artisans across any language. Anthropologists centuries later will highlight such interactions as proof that rival tradesfolk could maintain camaraderie despite fierce competition, challenging the myth of the purely cutthroat West. As you return indoors, a cloud of steam billows from the copper cauldron, haloing your silhouette like a saint of suds. You survey your humble kingdom. Patched roof, patched tub, ledger with budding decimals. Owning soap, you realize, may never glitter like a vein of quartz in the hillside, but it buys comfort, respect, maybe even time. An asset more precious than gold to those who dig holes for a living. The thought settles warm as freshly ironed linen. Before dousing the lantern, you scribble tomorrow's tasks. Render tallow, scout affordable ash sources. Design new sign boasting in-house soap now available. You chuckle at the prospect of marketing lemonade when everyone else sells salt water. With luck and relentless elbow grease, you'll forge prosperity one bubble at a time. As sleep closes in, the patched tub's golden seam catches the lantern's final flicker, glowing like a thin vein of sunrise. In that gleam you glimpse the frontier's sly promise. Here, even the most battered vessel, if sealed with enough stubbornness and wax, can hold not just water but ambition. Dawn elbows its way through the skylight like a nosy neighbor, and you wake to the coppery hiss of your still-cool cauldron. The boarding house roosters are having an existential crisis. One crows, another croaks, a third forgets the tune entirely, but the racket is enough to yank you from half-dreams of dancing soap bubbles that never pop. You swing your feet to the floorboards. Still solid, thank you, and let that first lungful of pine-tinged air announce the day. Time to turn rendered tallow and wood ash into gold of a subtler shade. Profit. You stoke the stove, set an iron pot to render last night's butcher scraps, and watch fat liquefy into a glossy puddle. The smell is definitive. You crack the door so fresh air can stage an intervention, then fetch the ash barrel. Chemistry textbooks, yet to be written, will one day explain the exact saponification process. You rely on a more practical formula. 1 part intuition, 2 parts fear of fabric loss, and exactly 3 muttered prayers to Saint Suds of the consistently alkaline. By mid-morning the shack is an aromatic paradox. Half bakery, thanks to the wax resin, seems still faintly perfumed, and half tannery. You ladle thick, milky soap batter into wooden molds, then slide them under the cot to cure. First batch done and none exploded. A win. The applause of accomplishment is interrupted by a booming knock that rattles loose plaster. You open the door to find a giant of a man blocking the sun. Boots like coal barges, beard like moss on a boulder, arms cradling a bundle wrapped in grain sackcloth. He introduces himself as Angus Ox McKittrick, late of Nova Scotia, self-styled champion boulder roller of the Tuolumne diggings. He offers no handshake. Both mitts are busy restraining the bundle as though it might leap free and bite. With theatrical gentleness Ox sets his package on your workbench. The sack lands with a thud clang, as if metallic objects inside resent the sudden stop. You loosen the twine and peel back layers until you reach the core. A pair of wool trousers so stiff they creak when flexed, a red flannel undershirt welded into shape, and a set of long johns that might have achieved sentience somewhere around last February. The ensemble stands upright without assistance. like a scarecrow auditioning for legislation. Ox rumbles. Been busy. You nod. Understatement accepted. He needs them laundered by Friday because he plans to propose marriage. He doesn't specify to whom, nor whether the lucky person is aware. Payment. $30 in coin and, Ox winks, a mysterious tin box of premium finds. You lift the lid to reveal twisted, dull gray pebbles the size of thimbles. Not silver, heavier. Mercury amalgam-soaked gold nuggets, you realize, common byproducts of hydraulic mining. Mainstream fact. Miners often used mercury to bind microscopic gold particles. Unfortunately, the metal also bound to everything else, including underwear waistbands. Historians will later list mercury poisoning as an occupational hazard right up there with dynamite mishaps. For now, the amalgam is currency. You weigh the risk of handling toxic specks versus the thrill of $30 cash. Enough to buy a barrel of coffee or a third of a piano. Decision, yes, with caution. You note the smell of metal and regret you can't see caution under a microscope. But you do don a pair of rabbit hide mitts acquired from a traveling trapper. They give you the dexterity of a sleep-deprived lobster. Yet they beat bare skin. Ox signs the ledger with an X so broad it nearly qualifies as modern art. Then lumbers off, leaving the bundle vibrating vaguely as if preparing an encore. You exhale, lock the door, and begin a forensic examination. The trousers pockets jingle. You fish out gravel, a blue glass bead, and, surprise, half of a corroded spoon. Along the cuffs a crust forms delicate serrations, mineral accretions that sparkle when scraped. Later in the century, textile archaeologists will dissect similar garments and debate whether such formations result from groundwater chemicals or, as one professor argues, aggressive personal hygiene procrastination. The jury stays out. First step is triage. You drag a wooden crate outside, tilt garments in, and pour 2 buckets of creek water laced with vinegar. A hissing fizz erupts. Steam that smells of wet sheep and sour apples wafts skyward. The long johns release a bubble the size of a child's kite. Nature's way of questioning your life choices. You prod stains with a stick, mapping geography. Ochre clay by the knees, lantern soot smudges at elbow crooks, and, most perplexing, variegated green splotches on the back panel that glitter under sunlight. Malachite, copper residue. Scholars in 1987 will publish dueling articles about such stains, one claiming they derive from copper or trampling, the other that they're simply mold varieties thriving on high-fat wool. The debate remains unresolved. Today, you dub them teal mysteries and move on. While the vinegar bath percolates, 2 local boys materialize offering to run errands for a penny each. You send them to buy extra lye and, importantly, bread rolls. Your stomach argues that epic laundering demands carbs. They return quickly, bread semi-confiscated via bites, but still edible. You pull the garments from the crate and transition to the cauldron. Water, heat, soap, elbow grease. You add a dash of wood ash, old laundress trick to soften notoriously hard creek water. On cue, gray foam blooms. You stir with a paddle once used, rumor says, to mash potatoes for a 40-man logging camp. It now whirls cloth and suds in relentless circles. Steam clouds the shack so densely you might as well be laundering inside a cumulonimbus. Visibility shrinks to arm's length. Each breath tastes faintly of mutton and pine resin. You hum a shanty to steady rhythm. Heave away, haul away. Though in your version the chorus goes, scrub away, soak away. Hours pass measured by spoonfuls of rendered tallow added into the mix. A counterintuitive but proven softener that leaves wool flexible instead of rigid as ship's canvas. Around noon the gambler neighbor pokes his head through the plank hole, now curtained with a checkered hanky. Smells like you're cooking a sheep alive, he observes, eyes watering. You quip, just bathing one that died last spring. Both laugh. His hat feather wiggles approval. He hands you 2 linen waistcoats stained with wine, coffee, and possibly tears. Payment? Chips equal to $15 come morning. He claims the odds are in his favor. You know better, but waistcoats fit nicely in the current cauldron load. As afternoon slants, you lift the undershirt with tongs. Miraculous difference. Color returns to recognizable red, albeit faded to rose, and the stiffness finally melts. The malachite blotches lighten but refuse total surrender. You contemplate chemical warfare, nitric acid? Too risky. Instead you try the Chinese chrysanthemum soap. Gentle yet rumored to coax metals from fabric. You rub a lather into the green patch, massage, rinse. The patch fades another shade. Good enough. If Ox asks, you'll chalk residual specks up to mining heritage. The trousers pose a tougher foe. Their seams harbor clay packed tighter than a miser's purse. You resort to a bone scraper, gift from the Mohawk Scout, to pry loose the worst clumps. Underneath, wool emerges shockingly intact. Quality cloth endures what men cannot, you muse. You spend 2 hours alternately boiling, beating, rinsing in cold creek water until the runoff finally runs clear instead of rust-tinged. In that amber rinse you glimpse swirling flecks, gold or pyrite. You strain the liquid through cheesecloth, never waste opportunity. A few bright grains settle in the cloth. Real gold, the whispery heft tells you. Enough for half a cup of coffee? Maybe, but principle counts. Laundry pays twice when luck smiles. With daylight waning, you rig drying lines inside. Outside humidity threatens mildew. Shirts hang like reformed criminals. Trousers stretch obediently from beam to beam. A slow fire in the stove keeps air warm and circulates so gently you swear you invented climate control. While garments drip, you tackle accounting. Ox's 30 coins jingle into the strongbox. The amalgam nuggets join a separate jar marked, "Handle with regret." You resolve to trade them for bullion at the assayers before contaminants chew through glass. And maybe your lungs. Meanwhile, gamblers' waistcoats simmer. You add lemon peel for scent. Because why not? Supper is bread dunked in creek-cooled stew delivered by the Swedish baker as payment for last week's towel rescue. The baker complains his dough won't rise. Altitude and humidity, you suggest, though you suspect his yeast is lazier than a gold pan in January. You trade him a teaspoon of spare sourdough starter, cultural exchange at its most literal. He quips that laundry folk are half chemist already. You accept the accidental compliment. Night deepens and violin strains drift from the saloon. Someone plays Lorena, that melancholy favorite of heartsick wanderers. You pause to listen, wiping hands on a flour sack, feeling an uninvited wave of homesickness crest and recede. Out here, everyone is a ship sailing without charts, you think. Some navigate by gold, others by memory. Some by the smell of clean linen in a world that forgot such luxuries exist. With Ox's garments nearly dry, you begin pressing them on your iron slab heated atop the stove. Each hiss under the iron's smooth belly is punctuation in the sentence of transformation. Filthy bundle becomes respectable attire. You marvel again how laundry is alchemy minus the philosopher's stone. Somewhere scholars will call this micro-labor capitalism. But tonight you call it magic. 3 knocks. Anxious, hurried, interrupt. You open to find the town doctor, spectacles fogged, cradling a set of blood-specked trousers. He mutters about an injured miner. Needs the cloth cleaned for reuse, hospitals being luxuries. You blink, recall the no-blood clause of your self-imposed sanity. But you also see desperation. The doctor's shaking hands. The life may be saved by sterility. You compromise, you'll scour and boil, but the doctor must supply lime and carbolic acid you can splash post-wash. He agrees, grateful. Mainstream medicine of 1850 being less germ-aware than a toddler, your suggestion borders on revolutionary. Historians of public health will later debate whether frontier laundries served as proto-sterilization hubs, bridging dark ages and modern antisepsis. Tonight, you just do what feels correct. The doctor's emergency load means you work past midnight. As you wring the trousers one final time, you reflect on workload. Ox's garments await collection, gamblers' waistcoats still drip, and now doctor's emergency textiles line a separate rack, labeled with chalk marks to avoid cross-contamination. Capacity reached. You need help. Help in this town comes in unexpected packages. Enter Maylene, a teenage girl with calloused palms who shyly steps into your doorway at dawn number 2 of the Ox saga. She carries a recommendation note scrawled in Chinese characters you half recognize. It seems Master Huang has sent her, a former rice mill worker now adrift, for apprenticeship. Wage, board plus $1 weekly. You glance at your ledger and the still tacky soap slabs. Yes, you need her. You write her name in the ledger, hand her a pair of spare gloves, and point to the ammonia bucket. Training commences with smiles and mime. Language divides melt under universal laws of laundry. Dip, scrub, rinse, whistle on every third haul. With 2 pairs of hands, the shack becomes a coordinated dance. Maylene holds cloth taut while you strike stains, flips garments mid-press, practices heating irons to precise temperature, judged by spitting a drop of water onto the metal and listening to the sizzle pitch. She giggles at your accent, attempting her name. You laugh when she mispronounces, darn. Humor is soap for social friction. Academic papers in the 21st century will analyze bilingual work crews and note how task-based lexicons evolve spontaneously. You witness Genesis in real time as the two of you invent gestures meaning, more starch, too hot, and someone's at the door. That someone, mid-afternoon, is Ox, beard braided with fresh wildflowers. Apparently he's courting. He inspects shirt cuffs, presses trouser seams with a blacksmith's thumb, and breaks into a grin that might split granite when satisfied. He thrusts an extra $5 gold piece into your palm. Tip 4. Making a bear look like a gentleman. You bow slightly, then casually mention the remaining glitter specks are traces of copper or resisting removal. He shrugs, says it adds character. You resist urge to laugh, character, yes, or heavy metals. Either way, job successful. After Ox's business, Gambler returns sheepishly with half the chips he promised. Luck abandoned him. He offers a harmonica instead, plus handwritten IOU. You accept instrument but not IOU. Laundry runs on real tender, not air. He fetches coin from a friend and promises never to bet against a one-eyed dealer again. Lesson learned? Doubtful. Evening finds you and Maylene partitioning tasks. She manages washboards, you command cauldron. You discuss soap futures in a mixture of English, Cantonese, and elaborate pantomime. She suggests adding crushed lotus root for fragrance. You scribble note. She claims it softens water, something her grandmother swore by. Historians will later bicker. Did lotus root truly see widespread use in gold rush laundries, or is that nostalgic myth? Evidence scarce, argument ongoing. You promise to test. At week's end, revenue tallies to a modest fortune. $48 net after expenses. Enough to afford a proper wooden sign carved by a craftsman. Not charcoal scribble. Perhaps even glass panes to replace torn canvas window patches. The dream expands. A row of washtubs, a rear courtyard with rain barrels, maybe a bell to ring when orders are ready. That Saturday market day, you and Maylene close shop early and stroll dusty stalls. She wants ginger candy, you crave a new ledger. You buy her 2 sticks, mentorship has perks, then haggle over a thick-bound ledger with pre-printed columns. The stationer includes a bonus bottle of ink, claiming it's raven feather black. You wonder if ravens object. Probably not. Back at the shack you address the doctor's trousers. Now sanitized, pressed, and odor-free. He collects them, astonished at cleanliness and faint chrysanthemum fragrance. He pays with a small glass vial of quinine, rare miracle for malaria. For emergencies, he says. You tuck it in a tin box beside soap recipes. Survival kit growing. Maylene tackles final chores while you step outside under star-salted sky. Overhead, Orion assumes winter patrol, and you realize seasons pivot subtly even here. Nights colder, water buckets film with ice by dawn. Will garments multiply? You calculate extra firewood needs and assign budget. Complex? Yes. But the rhythm of enterprise drums on. You re-enter to find Maylene practicing harmonica, coaxing hesitant notes that flutter like moth wings. The tune is unfamiliar, maybe a folk melody from Guangdong, but you hum along until both lines weave into something new. Music curls with steam, rises through the skylight to join the stars. Tomorrow will bring another bundle. Another stain daring you to decode its origin story. Some will come out, some will stay, and academics decades hence will squint at fiber samples under microscopes debating which minerals, which molds, which moments of human hustle etch themselves into cloth. You smile at the thought. Your day's work becomes their footnotes. Funny how history wrinkles like linen, smoothing only when pressed by time. For now, you bank the stove, pat the tub's sturdy rim, and whisper thanks to seams that hold. You bid Maylene good night, her reply a drowsy wanin. As she exits to her boarding house, you consider offering her cot corner tomorrow. Winter looms, and teamwork thrives best under one roof. Details for dawn. You blow out the lantern, lie on your cot, and listen. Outside, creek water chatters over stones. Mules rustle hay. The gambling tent erupts in muffled cheers. Inside, soap cures beneath you, soft tallow scent mingling with pine. Somewhere between that smell and the harmonica's lingering echo, you drift off, satisfied that even the filthiest bundle can transform under persistent, sudsy effort, and that stains, like stories, rarely wash out completely but sometimes shine brighter for surviving the boil. Sunrise limps over Hangtown like a prospector after his fifth keg of bad whiskey, and you step outside to greet it with a yawn so wide a passing jaybird nearly veers in for lodging. Frost crusts the plank walk, glittering beneath stray lantern light, but your breath emerges steady, soap-scented, of all things. That's new. 3 weeks of boiling fat and chrysanthemum oil have apparently colonized your lungs. You half wonder if you'll start exhaling bubbles by Valentine's Day. Inside, Maylene already ladles the previous night's batch into molds, humming the tune she taught you on harmonica. The cottage warmth feels less like a shack and more like an alchemist's lair. Copper cauldron simmering, wooden molds lined like coffins for miniature ghosts, and a ledger crackling beside the stove where last night's fire kissed its cover. Today, though, numbers matter even more than suds because you're about to learn that soap, your humble, tallow-tinged soap, buys more than clean cuffs. It buys favors, tools, maybe an election or two, depending on who's counting. Your first clue arrives in the person of Dolly Two-Pair McGraw, the only gambler in town with a velvet waistcoat on which new coffee stains spontaneously appear mid-deal. She slips through the doorway, frost swirling behind her like stage smoke, and offers you a proposition. "Trade, not cash," she whispers, producing a battered silver pocket watch shaped like a walnut. "Needs repairs. Take 3 cakes of soap off your hands." You blink. A month ago soap was an expense. Now it's a chip on the card table of frontier commerce. You tap the watch, gears still tick, chain intact, and nod. She grins, pockets 3 bars stamped with your new house mark, a turtle inside a sud spiral, Maylene's idea, and glides back toward the saloon, watch dangling like a plumb bob measuring the room's envy. The trade sets off a landslide you couldn't stop if you wanted to. By noon, prospectors pass your door less for laundering and more to haggle bars of Hangtown turtle against everything from lamp oil to live chickens. Their logic is simple. Soap is durable, divisible, and, unlike raw gold dust, doesn't blow away in a stiff breeze or weigh down a pocket so much it bursts. Mainstream fact, diaries from 1850s camps reveal soap routinely filled gaps where minted coin failed to circulate, especially during supply ship delays around Cape Horn, an 8-month trudge that taught sailors new synonyms for despair. Soap, lighter than nuggets and impossible to fake sparkle with pyrite, became frontier petty cash. Your cauldron, it turns out, mints currency without permission from Washington. Word of this homegrown gold substitute drifts up the muddy main drag, past the assay office where scales squeak beneath greed, past the butcher wrapping steaks in last month's newspapers, all the way to Sutter's hardware store. Sutter, who's not the famous mill owner but claims a marketing coincidence, arrives carrying a crate of hammers. He wants 20 solid cakes, lie heavy and hard, in exchange for a keg of nails and 2 cast-iron washboards. Precisely what you've been saving coin to buy. You inspect the merchandise. Nails rust-free, washboards sporting ripples crisp as Sierra peaks. Done. Your handshake seals a barter worth nearly $40 in face value. But the ledger will record 0 coin meeting 0 dust. Instead it will note hammer and nails, paid in soap. A line future historians will photograph for journals and argue whether it reflects desperate scarcity or ingenious liquidity. The debate, they'll say, hinges on whether participants considered soap money or merchandise used monetarily. You, stuck in the moment, simply think of it as breath turned solid. Days blur into a foamy carnival. You and Maylene crank production. Dawn to dusk rendering, pouring, cooling, stamping. You modify molds so each bar carries your turtle swirl on one face and 4 dots. Like pips on a die, on the other. Why? Because gamblers love dice, and gamblers, you've learned, lubricate any local economy faster than bankers. Maylene paints promotional scrolls in neat ink strokes. Clean wins. Trade turtle soap. You hang one outside the gambling tent and another at the creek crossing where mules fuss about cold water. Within hours, muleteers trade oats for soap to keep saddles supple. Apparently lie in tiny doses strips sweat salts from leather better than vinegar. A weird, wonderful trivia nugget. Certain 19th century cavalry manuals recommended soap solution to counteract horse sweat rot. Nobody agrees on its efficacy, but it smells nicer than boiled vinegar and thus wins hearts. Nightfall of day 5 in this new currency era finds you squinting at a chalkboard you've tacked beside the stove. Across its soot-black surface you've chalked exchange board. Columns red dust, coin, beef jerky, candles, soap. Each evening you and Maylene update rates. 1 soap cake currently equals 50 cents, or half a pound of salted pork, or 3 hinge bolts. Rates swing like a drunk trapeze artist. Nothing stays fixed longer than sunrise. You're living inside a living, shrieking Econ 101 experiment. Maylene laughs at your frustrated sighs and sketches a doodle of 2 turtles juggling soap bars above the columns. Balance, she says, then adds a 3rd turtle half erased. Instability. Instability soon stomps through your door in size 12 boots. Plaster flakes tremble as Casey Quicklime O'Rourke bursts in waving. Of all things, a lantern filled to the brim with dusty yellow soap shavings molded into a sloppy cake. Counterfeit, he bellows. Turns out a rival operation, 3 alleys south, has started pressing low-grade lie cakes cut with chalk dust and river silt, then stamping the outside with your turtle swirl crudely scratched by all. The fakes crumble on contact with water. Worse, they leave a residue that stains cloth the color of political corruption. O'Rourke demands refund. You handle his complaint with calm. Offer 3 genuine cakes, free laundering for his work shirts, and, smart move, a private demonstration in your washtub. You drop a counterfeit. It dissolves like bad promises. You drop a genuine bar. It holds shape, releasing steady white foam. Satisfied, and perhaps slightly charmed, O'Rourke stomps out singing a Dublin ballad about soap waging war on mud. Crisis spurs innovation. You commission the blacksmith to forge a small brass stamp bearing a 2nd symbol. A diagonal lightning stroke behind the turtle shell. Only you own it, only you and Maylene stamp it, and you press each bar while it's still warm enough to receive the mark. Counterfeiters would need your exact die or exceptional artistry to copy it. For extra security, you start adding a drop of indigo dye into every 10th batch. Under lamplight the bars look ordinary, but in morning sun they flash blue-green, like secret banknotes glimpsed in ultraviolet. Scholars 2 centuries hence will analyze one of your bars dug up near Sacramento and declare it the earliest documented anti-counterfeit measure in West Coast soap money. Though another expert will claim Basque shepherds did it first with sheep tallow cubes. Debate will rage in footnotes. You'll be too dead to care. Meanwhile, news of Hangtown Blue Flash soap travels faster than a stagecoach outrunning tax collectors. The butcher posts prices on a plank. Beefsteak, 1 pound equals 1 bar. Bacon, 1 pound equals 1.5 bars. The barber down the road shaves chins for 2 strokes of the razor or 1 stroke of soap. Whichever sounds cooler that morning. Even the preacher adjusts Sunday tithing. Bread loaves or bars accepted at equal grace. 1 wagon train passing through leaves half its oats in Hangtown purely to stock up on your currency before heading north where coins are scarce but laundry is universal. The phenomenon catches the eye of Deputy Census Agent Willis Fraser, a man who counts people for a living and therefore mistrusts anything too lively. He strides into your shack, notebook poised, itching to document this unsanctioned mint of cleanliness. Fraser's questions bounce like marbles on a washboard. Average lie ratio? Annual volume? Exchange fluctuation. You answer diligently, though he frowns when you describe your floating peg to bacon. He copies your turtle lightning mark into his ledger, crooked but legible, and warns that Sacramento might levy a cleansing duty once soap circulates beyond county lines. You smile, offer him a complimentary bar scented with fir needles, and remind him that legislators also need their collars whitened. He pockets the sample, cheeks reddening, and departs muttering that maybe it's time dictionaries updated the definition of legal tender. Evening brings an impromptu town meeting outside the livery. Lanterns cluster like fireflies above wool coats, and in their glow you see faces you've washed shirts for, shaved, fed, or bartered nails with. The topic: establishing a common value chart to stabilize the soap standard before inflation blooms. You're spontaneously elected to the committee, partly because your hands are already raised holding documentation chalkboard, partly because no one else can do math without removing boots for extra toes. Debate is lively and delightfully weird. One miner argues for pegging soap to the whiskey bottle, keeps priorities straight. A schoolmarm counters that children need chalk, not hooch, so soap should track chalk prices. A third voice, the town's sole surviving newspaper editor, suggests indexing to postage stamps so Eastern readers can comprehend remittance ledgers. Over 2 hours, consensus meanders toward a compromise. Soap's face value shall equal 1 US silver dime, until such a time as dimes outnumber soap bars. Unlikely given silver shortages. The final clause reads, scholars may review the scale every 3 months or whenever they feel pedantic enough. Everybody signs with an X, a flourish, or, in one showy case, their favorite profanity in Latin. You file the agreement in your ledger beside a doodle of a smirking turtle. Scholars later will unearth this document and spar for an entire conference session titled Soft Money on the Hard Frontier, Soap's Role in Proto-Monetary Dynamics. Some will argue the chart marks the first democratic, community-backed ersatz currency west of the Rockies. Others will insist indigenous wampum precedents invalidate that claim. You, in the here and sudsy now, just feel relief. At least you won't need to haggle whether 2 buttons and a bullfrog equal half a washboard tomorrow. 3 weeks into soap standardization, you witness a scene equal parts comedy and cautionary tale. The blacksmith, tipsy on victory after forging 15 new crowbars, staggers down Main clutching a burlap sack of soap. He trips, sack splits, bars scatter. A stray dog, the mayor's unofficially, mistakes them for bones and bolts, slobbering. Minutes later, the poor hound foams at the mouth from lye overload, not rabies. The mayor's outraged curses echo across town until Maylene offers the solution. Neutralize the dog's stomach acid with diluted vinegar. The dog survives, the mayor recovers composure, and a public notice appears: soap is money, not dog food. Weird trivia. Veterinary annals will later record this as one of the earliest documented canine alkaline poisoning cases treated successfully with kitchen remedies. At conferences, professors will brandish it as proof civilians often outpace doctors in chemical understanding. While fame swells, production strains. Would supplies shrink? Your shack devours firewood like a newspaper devours politics. To maintain output, you strike a deal with a sawmill 2 valleys over. You'll supply 30 deluxe cinnamon-scented bars monthly, Maylene's aromatic innovation, in exchange for off-cut scrap. Transport risk aside, the trade locks your raw heat supply. Conveniently, cinnamon masks the rendering fat smell, turning the shack into an olfactory beacon. Miners follow their noses straight in line, like cartoon characters chasing pie steam. One crisp morning, a stagecoach rumbles in carrying 3 gentlemen in tailored coats and expressions of perpetual skepticism. San Francisco investors sniffing fresh markets. They purchase 5 bars each, circle the blocks counting how many pockets hold turtle soap, and by lunch request a meeting. Over boiled coffee, they propose financing a larger facility. Bigger vats, conveyor ringers, maybe a 2-story drying loft. In exchange, they demand 35% ownership and exclusive right to export Hangtown tender to both Oregon and Baja California. You weigh their offer like soap in your palm. 35% is a hefty slice of your skin. Plus, you suspect they drown Maylene's artistry under ledgers heavier than anvils. You counter 10%, advisory roll, and no export without a fair price cap. They scoff, sip coffee, and mutter about backwoods entrepreneurs with delusions of grandeur. You politely show them the door and hand each a farewell bar to remember what opportunity smelled like. Rebuffed investors exit just in time to see a crowd at the assay office celebrating the first official conversion of turtle soap into minted coin. Old Mr. Abrams, the watchmaker with trembling hands, trades 36 bars for a silver certificate shipped via Wells Fargo. The clerk prints a receipt glazed with snail trail ink while townsfolk cheer. Newspapers elsewhere will dub it Soap Day, and cartoonists will sketch turtles perched atop washing boards labeled bank. But the watchers tonight simply grin, perhaps sensing that something comically monumental just happened. Dirt's enemy has become government-recognized value. Inevitably, bubbles burst. Counterfeit 2.0 appears, this time prettier and scented with lavender to mask chalk grit. You crack one open, center hollow, stuffed with dried moss for weight. Ingenious. Anger flares only briefly before curiosity wins. How to outsmart copycats again. Maylene suggests embedding a single grain of rice imprinted with the Chinese character for truth inside each legitimate bar. The rice, she explains, will gelatinize and stick to soap core but remain legible under magnification, if anyone bothers to check. You test the process. It works, though it adds an extra step and the characters are teeny. The hidden rice marks become an inside joke, a whisper network. Look for the grain, spin the bar in the sun. Authentic as a sunrise. Future museum curators, lacking magnifying instructions, will misidentify the grains as accidental inclusions from sloppy kitchens, until one graduate student translates the character and publishes a paper titled Starch Signatures. Subversive precision in frontier commerce. Around this time, an epidemic of minor injuries plagues town. Axe slips, panfall ankles, so the doctor runs low on bandage cloth. He offers to trade all the used but salvageable wrappings you can bleach for soap stock to disinfect new linen. You accept, boiling linen in lye water until it fades ghost white. Rumor claims your method prevents infection better than whiskey wash. Medical historians will later note that lye's high pH indeed kills many bacteria, supporting your accidental public health crusade. They'll still argue whether cloth fibers weakened under repeated harsh boils, but you'll recall seeing grateful patients limping less. Evidence enough. One snowy dusk. Yes, snow drifts now, winter stamping territory. The soap shed's door rattles violently. Bandits? You grab the iron paddle. Maylene snatches a kettle of nearly set soap, lethal if hurled. The door swings open to reveal a newspaper correspondent from the Alta California, nose blue but eyes blazing with scoop fever. He heard rumors of pioneer soap currency and wants an interview. You oblige, answering questions about pH, payroll, counterfeit, and the philosophical difference between cleanliness and wealth. He scribbles until his graphite splinters, then requests a portrait sketch. You strike a pose. Paddle a scepter, soap bar balanced on one palm. Maylene beside you holding the rice grain stamp like a queen with signet ring. The sketch, printed weeks later, will caption you both kings of lather, to which Maylene will write a biting letter about gender. The newspaper will apologize in a footnote. Publicity magnetizes opportunity and danger. 2 nights after publication, a pair of masked thieves slip through your skylight, aiming for crates of finished currency. Their plan sours faster than milk in July because Maylene, ever forward-thinking, waxes the floorboards weekly to repel dust. One step, feet skid. They crash into drying racks, yank the bell you installed as a ready chime, triggering a cacophony. You wake, fling a bucket of half-liquid soap at silhouettes. Boards, bandits, and bars slide into a frothy heap, limbs flailing like eels in a washtub. Local law arrives within minutes, guided by the noise, hauls culprits off, and later quips you've invented, non-lethal soap artillery. Military historians centuries on will dismiss that as anecdote, but the constable swears he considered requisitioning a larger bucket for crowd control. By early spring, the novelty stabilizes. Soap remains valuable, but no longer scarce, thanks to your increased production and imitators who now stamp frogs, mules, or even caricatured U.S. eagles on their bars. Inflation whispers at the window. You meet with the original currency committee to revise the peg downward. 1 bar now equals 8 cents, reflecting oversupply. Some grumble, others shrug. Market finds equilibrium like a drying shirt finds wind. You accept the squeeze because you anticipated it, diversifying income back into laundry proper, specialized steam pressing for Sunday best, and a side hustle manufacturing tiny soap chips for card players to bet discreetly. Chips rarely cash out but vanish up sleeves or under tables, fueling, ironically, sustained demand. Amid adjustments, two Harvard-trained economists arrive to study your microeconomy. They lug clipboards, sleepy expressions, and suits that scream, "Never touched mud." Over several evenings they grill you, Maylene, the butcher, and the schoolmarm about transaction frequencies, marginal utility, cost curves. Their eventual journal article will dub Hangtown a rare frontier instance of spontaneously emergent commodity currency under conditions of metallic scarcity, but then spiral into footnotes crusading over formulaic coefficients. Another article will fire back claiming your success was due more to social trust codified by the turtle mark than intrinsic soap value. Neither side will mention Maylene's rice grain signature, proving scholars sometimes miss the grain for the starch. One lazy Sunday you climb a ridge with Maylene, overlooking town. From this height, rooftops glint, creek wriggles silver between pines, and the white tents of new arrivals pepper the valley like freckles. You chew cinnamon sticks, cheaper than tobacco, and watch sunlight bounce off laundry lines strung across yards, your bars clipping them in clothespins as weights. You point, laugh, money hanging out to dry. Maylene shakes her head, amused, then quotes an old proverb, "When the water is clear, fish won't bite." You puzzle, she clarifies. Transparency has a price. Mystery greases wheels. In soap's case, too much supply clarifies value so sharply people start ignoring it. You scribble the proverb in your notebook, might etch it onto the next ledger cover. Back down the ridge, you find the preacher waiting at your step, hat in hand. Not for laundry this time. He invites you to speak at Sunday evening gathering about the moral implications of earthly cleanliness doubling as mammon. You accept reluctantly, fearing sermonizing, but he assures you it's more debate than lecture. During the talk, you field questions like, does soap money corrupt souls or cleanse them? And if cleanliness is next to godliness, is soap counterfeit grace? You deflect with humor. If you pay tithe in turtle bars, at least it washes away sins conveniently. Congregation laughs. Academic theologians 120 years hence will footnote the event, some branding it the earliest recorded blend of market metaphors and moral philosophy in a frontier church. Others argue they were simply bored and liked jokes. The room that night, though, feels alive, like hope wearing its Sunday apron. Late that spring night, ledger balanced, lantern low, you slide one blue flash bar between pages of your journal like a pressed flower. Souvenir for a future that doesn't yet exist. You note today's closing rate, 7.8 cent. The preacher's laughter, and the way Maylene's rice characters require only 2 strokes yet hold worlds. Soap taught you economics faster than any school, taught community faster than any town hall, taught vulnerability, because it melts if you don't keep it dry. Melt, but also lathers, cleansing more than cloth. And coins? They'll tarnish. Dust will blow. But something shaped by hands, useful, scented, necessary, maybe that can last longer in memory than in mint. You douse the lantern, feeling calluses pulse in time with the creek's distant murmur. Tomorrow sunrise will elbow through the skylight again, and you'll rise, stir fat, test lye, stamp turtles. If currency can smell faintly of chrysanthemum and cinnamon while buying bread, maybe history itself can smell a little sweeter too, provided someone's willing to scrub. A week of chilly dawns slips by before you realize the creek that once babbled obligingly beside your shack has begun to whisper instead of shout. The spring snowmelt you took for granted is retreating upslope, and each day the waterline sinks like a timid bank account. At first you shrug. One less splash against your boots, but the 5th morning your bucket clangs against stones where liquid used to glug. Welcome to the unofficial 5th season of the Sierra. Water panic. On cue, a hand-painted sign appears near the footbridge. Creek access fee, 1 soap bar or 10 cents per pail. It's hammered up by Calvin Puddle's broom, a self-appointed warden whose only credential is owning the 2 driest boots in camp. Yesterday he merely lurked, smirking at anyone who sloshed. Today he guards the narrowing channel with a shotgun draped casually across his lap, the picture of entrepreneurial menace. You eye the fee board, then your dwindling stock of turtle bars, and decide diplomacy beats ballistics at dawn. Maylene follows, balancing twin yolks of empty tins across her shoulders. The moment Puddles sees your soap stamp, he brightens like a struck match. "Preferred customer," he crows, leaning on the gun as if it were a walking stick. He offers a discount, 8 cents, not 10, because your bars smell nicer than the gravel he usually accepts. You pay begrudgingly for 4 pails, marking the expense column ransom. Lugging water uphill becomes your daily marathon. Each trip wrestles a new obstacle. Ox teams chewing the mud, children skidding sled-style on shale, prospectors sluicing pans directly in the mouth of the creek, as though it were a gold-dispensing faucet. The sluice boards divert flow, turning the once-clear ribbon into a slurry of clay and crushed quartz. Your rinse loads come out streaked beige, and nobody pays extra for the camouflage look. By midday the sun bakes the valley until pine resin drips like honey from wounded bark. You spot a pair of Mexican vaqueros driving oxen hitched to barrels, importing water from an upstream spring they guard with revolvers. They sell by the dipper, a luxury only gamblers and dogged Methodists can afford. Their barrels bear a burned-in logo of a winged snake, and rumor claims a single spoonful makes coffee taste like a hymn. You sample a sip, definitely smoother than creek broth but priced like cologne. Back at the shack, you and Maylene decide that for now you'll drink sawdust-flavored creek stew and pray for rain. Rain refuses the invitation. Clouds tease, throwing shadows shaped like puddles, then skate eastward. Laundry demand, however, refuses to slow. In fact, the drier the climate, the faster miners sweat through shirts. And here the cosmic joke sharpens. Every additional bundle dropped on your table weighs precisely 1 frustration more than you have water to spare. Supply and demand pivot on a lever called H2O, and you're stuck beneath it like an ant under a seesaw. You brainstorm alternatives. Snowpack? Too distant. Melting ice chunks means renting mules and tents. Condensation stills? You sketch a contraption of metal sheets angled to catch night fog. But local drafts make the apparatus more kite than condenser. Maylene suggests digging a shallow pit near the shack lined with clay to catch runoff. You test it. Overnight the pit gathers a mere teacup. She frowns, mutters a Cantonese phrase that you suspect translates to, "Sky hoards the soup." Mainstream history lesson inserts itself. The gold rush didn't just birth boomtowns. It birthed water rights law. One crusty lawyer with pockets full of surveyor's stakes shows up waving papers citing the nascent doctrine of prior appropriation. First in time, first in right. He claims a Boston syndicate now owns every drop upstream thanks to an 18-page contract and a sachet of tobacco gifted to somebody's cousin. Historians still debate whether such dry ink deals held legal weight or were mere scarecrows propped up to spook small fry. For the moment it spooks plenty. Prospectors grumble but shuffle their pans downstream, leaving the creek above your intake eerily deserted, and marginally cleaner. Cleaner doesn't equal freer. Puddles doubles the access fee to 2 bars per bucket, gleefully pointing at the lawyer's decree as cosmic validation. At this rate you'll wash your profit away faster than soap melts in hot water. Something must shift, and soon. Shift arrives like thunder in shoe leather when a trio of Miwok men and 1 elder woman stride into camp carrying woven baskets brimful of water-worn granite pebbles. They march straight to the creek's throat, upstream of Puddles, and begin constructing a rock weir with motion so practiced it resembles dance. Within an hour they redirect a modest but steady trickle into a side channel no wider than a cradle. Then they vanish into the pines, leaving the channel gurgling like a newborn spring. You and half the town trail that sound until it resolves into a hidden pool reflecting pine tops like spears. A carved wooden sign, smooth as drift glass, reads in English letters, "Trade welcome, respect river." It dawns on everyone simultaneously. The Miwok have created an alternate tap, and they didn't hire a shotgun to advertise. The first prospector to kneel scoops a palmful, tastes, and claps like a seal on payday. Word spreads by echo sprouting legs. Respect, however, comes with unspoken rules. When you approach the elder, gray braids pinned with abalone. She requests payment not in soap or coin but in cloth. Bright, without holes. she specifies. You dash back, return with 2 bolt ends of bleached muslin you'd earmarked for future aprons. Muslin exchanged. She nods once and gestures to the channel. You fill your buckets free of guilt and brimming with gratitude. On the hike home, you note the contrast. Bartering with a sense of grace rather than extortion cools the sweat on your back. Academic anthropologists, decades later, will wrestle with the extent to which indigenous engineering underpinned gold rush infrastructure while going largely uncredited. Tonight, you just know your rinse water no longer tastes like old axle grease. Flush with liquid wealth, you ramp laundry throughput. Shirts once resigned to beige regain honest white. Trousers lose their geological stripes. Miners notice. A Yankee with sideburns sharp as fence posts boasts that his newly laundered undershirt practically glows in the dark. You neither confirm nor deny, but his testimony draws 3 more customers before lunch. Puddles, of course, notices the exodus dripping from his creek bank. He corners you with the injured dignity of a dethroned toad, demands to know your new source, brandishes his shotgun for punctuation. You calmly explain you've diversified supply through socially responsible partnerships. He blinks at the phrase, apparently mistaking it for a legal curse. You remind him shotgun pellets create more holes than revenue, and holes rarely hold water. He huffs off, perhaps to draft new signage. Emotional damage fee. Competition escalates. The Boston lawyer reappears, redrafting his contract to claim Rockweir water too. But the paper looks suspiciously smudged. A miner jokes it was written with tears, not ink. Meanwhile, rival laundries strike deals with the vaqueros, exchanging flannel bundles for discounted barrel fills. The alleys echo with sloshing yolks and curses in 3 languages as everyone scrambles for wet advantage. You realize you're watching an arms race waged with buckets instead of bullets. Time for strategy. You and Maylene implement what she dubs the bucket chain. You recruit 6 sturdy children, willing if bribed with molasses taffy, and station them at intervals between the Miwok Channel and your shack. Each child hands the sloshing load to the next, like notes along a grapevine. Efficiency triples, your shoulders sigh relief, and the kids earn sticky grins. The system delights onlookers, becomes minor spectacle, and soon other entrepreneurs copy it, forming bucket relays that crisscross town like braids. One diarist will later liken the sight to ants ferrying dew. Another insists it foreshadowed assembly line logistics that would define American industry. Scholars debate footnotes. You focus on not slipping in the overflow. With water secured, you tackle quality. Even the spring channel runs turbid after heavy sluicing days. Maylene unveils a secret weapon. Layered cloth filters lined with crushed charcoal from your stove. You position these atop catch basins. Water drips through, emerging noticeably clearer. A prospector with naval background identifies the concept as a Sullivan canvas filter, popular on long sea voyages. You hadn't known the name, but chalk another win for cross-cultural apprenticeship. Modern environmental engineers will cite such jury-rigged systems as early greywater remediation efforts. Locals just enjoy coffee that doesn't crunch. One afternoon, a traveling preacher asks if he may baptize converts in the pristine pool. You and the Miwok elder share a look, then politely decline. Laundry trumps sacraments today. The preacher, to his credit, laughs and offers to trade him singing for 2 buckets. You accept, and by sunset your shack echoes with baritone praise that even the soap blocks seem to absorb. Yet not all is singing and suds. After twilight, 2 men from the rival steam laundry attempt sabotage by damming the Miwok Channel with burlap sacks of tailings. Caught by the elder's grandson, they bolt, but damage done. Flow slows to a trickle. Town fury erupts. Even gamblers whose silk waistcoats depend on your rinse cycle howl for justice. A public tribunal outside the boarding house sentences the saboteurs to rebuild the channel bend under supervision, plus launder every blanket in the boarding house. By hand, no steam assist. The punishment elicits cheers and a fresh round of wagers on whether they'll survive the blisters. Criminal historians will later scratch heads at a community favoring restorative justice via public laundry labor, but contemporary diaries laud the symbolism. Foul play cleaned by literal cleanliness. Repairs complete. The Miwok elder gifts you a smooth stone etched with concentric circles. symbol, she says, of water's long memory. You place it near the ledger as a silent overseer of both accounts and ethics. In quiet moments you trace its rings, reminded that today's puddle can become tomorrow's flood, or vice versa. Summer teases with a preseason heat wave, and you glimpse the next phase of conflict: evaporation. Your filter barrels lose half their yield to the thirsty sky before you can funnel it into cauldrons. Solution: shade. You stretch muslin awnings above barrels, turning the alley into a patchwork tent city. The cloth billows, flapping soap-scented breezes down Main Street. Tourists, yes, tourists now, stop to sketch what one calls laundry sails harnessing invisible tides. An obscure but delightful fact: some 19th-century Australian sheep stations used similar awnings over sheep dip vats to reduce chemical loss. Whether idea migrated across oceans or was independently conceived remains another nugget historians argue over. Your water diaries swell. Intake measurements, loss percentages, days between bucket chain repairs. The detail would make a railroad accountant blush. In the margins you note oddities. Frog song volume seems to predict overnight condensation. Barrel water tastes sweetest on nights after distant lightning. Maylene adds her own observations in tidy Mandarin. Cloud shapes, pine scent intensity, number of fireflies over the creek. One day, meteorological societies will scour such notes for climate change proxies. You jot them because pattern equals survival. Then, at last, rain. Not a drizzle, but a sky rip unzipping over pine crowns with all the pent-up drama of a vaudeville finale. Townsfolk dart from shacks, mouths open, cheering as if gold fell instead of water. You and Maylene drag every bucket, tub, and washtub roofward. Gutters overflow, barrels thrum like drums under waterfalls. The Miwok Channel swells dangerously, so you and the bucket chain crew sprint with pickaxes to break new spillways, guiding torrents away from tents. In the chaos, one of the saboteurs, now reformed, shovels beside you, notching a record redemption arc. By morning, puddles mirror clouds and every trough brims. Puddle's broom's fee board floats downstream, ironically unpaid. He's nowhere to be seen, perhaps marooned upon his own deluge economics. Children skid through mud, laughter bubbling louder than sluice boxes. Your cauldron steams happily, water worry paused at least for a season. From the doorway you watch rivulets carve fresh hieroglyphs in the alley dust and feel something settle inside you. Maybe gratitude, maybe exhaustion shaped like contentment. Maylene steps beside you, offering a tin cup of rainwater tea steeped with pine tips. Tastes like the first syllable of dawn. She lifts her cup toward the freshly scoured sky and says, in half English, half hope, clouds spend, earth saves. You clink cups, catalog the line for tomorrow's journal, and turn back to the cauldron where honest work waits. Because if one lesson echoes louder than shotgun threats or parchment claims, it's that water, like fortune, never stays in the same hands long. All you can do is channel the flow, keep buckets mended, and try not to spill more than you need. Outside, the creek swells into a small, jubilant river, roaring louder than any town argument, shouting its own verdict on ownership. Whoever carries the next pail earns the right, but only for a moment. So you shoulder your buckets with a grin, step into the mud, and claim your moment while it lasts. Rain, generous as a gambler on a lucky streak, drenches Hangtown for 4 solid days before moseying east, leaving behind puddles the size of bathtubs and air that smells like sage and fresh paint. Your barrels and buckets bulge. The Miwok Channel sings like a choir. With water anxiety temporarily muted, your mind snaps back to the other half of laundry's eternal equation. Heat. Wet cloth without hot water is just heavier misery. And the spring downpour has soaked your dwindling firewood pile so thoroughly it might sprout leaves again. Time for reinforcements. You and Maylene trudge to the sawmill armed with soap bars stamped in the new Turtle Lightning rice grain signature. Old Man Haskins, the mill owner, whistles at your offer. 30 bars for a wagon of dry offcuts, and throws in a cracked but usable oak barrel because that logo makes me grin. You roll the treasure home through mud that squelches like custard, grateful that currency now fits in a knapsack and not a strongbox. Back at the shack, you face the cauldron situation. The copper pot that carried you through soap currency fame now seems puny beside your ambitions. Enter your newest acquisition, a cast-iron Leviathan salvaged from a defunct whale oil refinery in Monterey, recently hauled inland on a flatbed wagon. The pot's mouth could swallow a grown man with room for dessert, and when you wrap its rim it booms like a church bell with indigestion. You christen her Moby tub and recruit half the town, plus 2 skeptical mules, to lever her onto a stone hearth you've been stacking for weeks. As you mortar the final granite block, an Irish bricklayer named Seamus observes that the setup looks grand enough to cook the Pope. You respond that you'll settle for underpants. Seamus laughs and gifts you a scarred brass thermometer liberated from a brewery. Keep your eye on the red line, or your socks'll stew like potatoes, he warns. Mainstream historical fact: 19th century laundries often borrowed brewery hardware because both trades prized consistent, rolling boils. Scalds were common when thermometers shattered or got ignored. Maylene binds kindling under Moby tub like she's stacking mahjong tiles, each gap calculated for draft. You strike flint, the fire catches, and flames begin their slow waltz around cast iron. Cinnamon-scented smoke curls skyward, mingling with pine to create an aroma oddly reminiscent of holiday pastries. You imagine future archaeologists puzzling over why a laundry smells like gingerbread. While the water heats, you revisit fuel math. Even with Haskins's offcuts, the tub's appetite will chew through wood faster than prospectors chew tobacco. You scribble options on the chalkboard: charcoal, peat, coal shipped upriver. Charcoal wins by proximity. The blacksmith's apprentice has been burning pine chunks in earthen kilns and selling briquettes shaped like biscuits. You trade soap for a wheelbarrow load and a side wager on whether briquettes burn hotter than his boss's temper. Rumble underscores urgency. A queue has formed outside. Miners, gamblers, the schoolmarm holding a basket of damp pillowcases. The rain spree slathered red clay onto every hem in town. Today's docket would drown a lesser operation, but not with Moby tub flexing. You and Maylene choreograph a routine. One of you hoists garments via paddle, the other feeds logs, flips washboards, monitors thermometers. Steam plumes until shack windows fog opaque. Through the haze you glimpse your reflection. Hair plastered to forehead, cheeks glowing like forge coals, and laugh at the sight of a human kettle, skin marinaded in soap perfume. Just as you reach a rolling boil, the door flies open and Angus Ox McKittrick stumbles in clutching a lumpy canvas sack. Trouble, he pants, depositing the bundle with a thud that rattles the hearthstones. You open the sack and discover rocks? No, silver nitrate sticks, dozens of them, used by miners to detect gold veins. They need cleaning. The sticks' cotton ends are clogged with mud and quicksilver residue. Ox wants them pristine by dawn for a demonstration to visiting investors. Payment: a 50-pound sack of anthracite coal, black diamonds to a fire-hungry laundress. You shake hands, careful of chemical smears, and set the sticks soaking in a caustic bath while Ox tips his hat to Maylene and retreats into the wet evening. Mid-afternoon brings the first real test of Moby tub's power. You slide in a load of wool blankets so filthy they appear tie-dyed by despair. As temperature climbs, the copper thermometer's red column creeps past 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Then 190. Seamus's words echo. You ease the damper, but the anthracite roars hotter than pine, and pressure builds beneath the iron lid. Bubbles punch the surface like fists from an underworld uprising. You and Maylene exchange glances. The boiling point chapter headline practically writes itself. Quick history sidebar whispered across the foam. In 1851, San Francisco's largest commercial laundry exploded when an overstoked steam boiler ruptured, flinging cast iron into the bay like killer frisbees. Scholars still disagree whether sabotage or simple ignorance caused the blast, but they cite it as California's first industrial safety legislation catalyst. You drop that tidbit for context, plus to remind yourself not to repeat it. You throttle the fire with a shovel of wet sawdust, dampening the frenzy. Maylene steadies the lid with a plank and warns, "Dragon sleeps, but still breathes." Steam hisses through seams, wreathing her silhouette in ghostly halos. At 203 degrees Fahrenheit, the red line stalls. Crisis averted. Socks won't stew after all. The blankets churn obediently, color bleeding into water like surrender flags. As tension eases, the door creaks again. This time it's Dolly two-pair McGraw accompanied by a bespectacled man in an alabaster waistcoat. Professor Elijah Beaufort, self-proclaimed hydrodynamics visionary. He unfolds blueprints for a contraption he calls a rotating drum extractor, essentially a giant salad spinner meant to fling water from cloth, having drying time. Dolly wants to bankroll the prototype. Professor wants your endorsement as premier laundering expert. In exchange, you'll receive revenue share plus first access to the machine if it works. You scan the schematics. Gears, crank, a cage drum you could lose a cow in. It appears plausible, albeit optimistic. Cold fact interjection. Earlier prototypes of centrifugal wringers existed in Europe by 1850, fashioned from cider presses. Few survived frontier shipping intact. You negotiate. Professor builds a scaled-down model first, spins one of Ox's blankets dry without tearing it, and only then do you sign. Agreement inked with soap-scented wax seal. Naturally, they depart to scavenge gears. Evening settles, Moby tub quiets to a simmer, and you fish out the blankets with a pitchfork. They emerge pale, steam-trailing, weighty but metamorphosed. You hang them on rafter lines reinforced with wagon spokes. Steam curls upward, painting moisture halos on the ceiling like accidental frescoes. As you mop the floor, a sudden clang splits the air. Thermometer bulb cracks. Red alcohol gushing across iron. Luckily, the water has cooled. Tragedy narrowly misses staging an encore. You add by 2 spare thermometers to tomorrow's ledger, underlined thrice. Dinner is toasted cornbread, baked in Ox's coal-fired Dutch oven, smeared with apple butter purloined from the boarding house pantry as barter for cleaning 3 soup-splashed aprons. You share slices with Maylene atop a stack of folded shirts, discussing drum extractor possibilities. She sketches improvements, a waist-high crank, drainage chute, and posits using whalebone ribs for cage panels. Flexible yet strong. The notion of underwear spinning at whalebone speed tickles both of you into giggles. Somewhere past midnight, a distant boom echoes from the direction of the rival steam laundry. You peer through a warped pane. An orange plume licks the sky, then sputters out. Minutes later, a runner bangs on your door. Their steam kettle burst, sending laundry grizzly into the mud but sparing lives. Apparently, the saboteurs sentenced to heavy washing had stoked the boiler too high, seeking efficiency. Irony writes its own footnote. You haul buckets to help douse embers, and amid charred timbers you recognize the fatal combo of greed, haste, and poor gauges. The constable mutters about divine retribution. You think more about thermometers. Next sunrise, townsfolk gather in front of your shack, soot-streaked blankets clutched like lost puppies. With their competitor out of commission, you face triple demand. Moby Tub accepts the challenge. Coal roars, water spits, and your shoulders cycle arthritic protests. Maylene implements a clever staging system. While one boil completes, she preloads the next in wooden slings submerged just below the surface, shaving 10 minutes per batch. Labor economists not yet born will call this parallel processing, an innovation they usually attribute to factory assembly lines decades later. You'll call it survival. Professor Beaufort returns mid-rush with his model extractor, copper drum mounted on wagon wheels, crank handle sporting a whalebone grip exactly as Maylene sketched. You volunteer a sturdy work shirt as test subject. He cranks. The drum spins. Water spurts through perforations in gratifying arcs. 30 seconds later the shirt emerges merely damp. Crowd applauds. Beaufort beams. You mentally convert saved drying time into candle savings. A historian writing in 1924 will claim Beaufort's device marked the dawn of automated Pacific Coast laundering, though another will note he abandoned the patent in favor of gold speculation 3 months later. Scholars continue quibbling. The shirt's still dry. You strike a deal. You'll rent the prototype for $5 a week plus unlimited laundry credit. Beaufort agrees, scribbles contract, then asks whether soap currency counts as laundry credit. You grin, hand him 5 bars stamped with the Turtle Lightning rice grain pedigree. Contract paid. First practical use, the soot-ridden blankets from the steam laundry explosion. They exit Moby Tub like swamp beasts, spin in Beaufort's drum, and drape on lines feather-light. A watching miner remarks that you've turned laundry into a circus. Nah, you reply. We're just letting the laws of inertia pay rent. By dusk, you've processed 43 bundles. Record day. Fingers blister, wrists ache, but ledger leaps. You deposit a share into the community fund, rebuilding the damaged rival laundry. No sense fostering enemies when you can foster partnerships and avoid monopolistic scrutiny. The gesture garners raised eyebrows and cautious respect. Night's quiet hum returns. Crickets, distant banjo, drip of drying blankets. You jot journal notes beside the Miwok Elder's stone. Water abundant now, heat mastered with coal, throughput boosted by spin. Then add, almost as afterthought, need contingency if coal supply falters. Because frontier victories age faster than fish in summer. Cold fact footnote to frame your scheming. A handful of Sierra laundries reportedly burned bacon grease during coal shortages, infusing garments with an aroma miners either adored or abhorred. Scholars haven't located physical samples, leaving olfactory verdicts to imagination. You ponder bacon-scented petticoats and snort. Backup plan? Maybe, but only after customer surveys. As lantern flame gutters low, you stretch sore arms toward rafters. Steam ghosts still cling, but the room carries a new undercurrent. Metal, charcoal, forward motion. You sense the enterprise crossing a threshold, from cottage craft to proto-industry. With power comes danger. You vow never to let boilers outrun gauges. Better late deliveries than funerals. Maylene pads over, sets the cracked thermometer bulb on the table like a glass chrysalis. Reminder, she says softly. You nod. Slip the shard into a wooden box labeled errors. Study, don't repeat. Inside already rests the rice grain counterfeit, a sliver of the gambler's fake soap, and a scrap of burnt flannel from the rival blast. Your growing archive of cautionary tales. Future museum curators will salivate over this box. Tonight, it's simply ballast keeping you grounded. You bank the embers, securing Moby Tub's iron lid with 2 crossbars, and whisper a promise to the slumbering beast. Same dance tomorrow. No stomping on toes. Then you crawl onto your cot, muscles vibrating like spent tuning forks, lungs tingling with cinnamon smoke. Eyes drift shut as rain-sweet air shuffles through the cracked window. Somewhere in the distance, Beaufort tests his drum on linens under moonlight, the crank creaking like a distant cricket. Sleep rolls in, thick as steam, and in dreams you stand at a river of boiling stars, feeding constellations through a spinning sky ringer, watching galaxies drip dry across the void. Historians will debate what triggered the Industrial Revolution in the West. Railroads, telegraphs, gold. Yet you'll always suspect it started the night someone big enough to try slung a blanket into a barrel and cranked until inertia did the rest. Night drapes itself over Hangtown like an oversized quilt, all frayed edges and suspicious bulges, and you discover, as any veteran laundry hand eventually does, that darkness here is not an intermission but a double shift. Moby Tub cools only when you let it, which tonight you decidedly do not. Orders are stacked on the counter in precarious hillocks. Beaufort's centrifugal drum ticks faintly beside the hearth, eager for fresh spinning. And somewhere, high up the canyon, a distant whistle hints at yet another wagon train rolling in with more shirts, more blankets, more stories embedded in grease. Maylene ties a kerchief over her braid, lights the whale oil lantern, and announces in softly accented English, "We make Moon our foreman." You salute the idea with a chipped enamel mug of chicory brew, then toss a shovelful of anthracite into the firebox. Embers glow carnation red. Steam ghosts re-inhabit every rafter like actors returning for the midnight matinee. Outside, the boardwalk empties of polite society and repopulates with silhouettes that move in zigzags rather than lines. That's your cue. Night washing isn't merely about handling overflow. It's a tactical decision. Miners who can't afford to miss daylight digging bring their bundles after sundown, meaning the night shift is when the juiciest gossip bubbles up with the suds. Laundry, as you've learned, is the frontier's unofficial telegraph. Sure enough, the first knock belongs to Big Ears Mulrooney, named less for auricular size than for talent in eavesdropping. He drops a canvas satchel of shirts so soaked in creek water they drip a Morse code on your floorboards. As you weigh the bundle, he leans conspiratorially over the counter and mutters about a plan brewing to liberate an abandoned claim on Widow's Ridge. You grunt non-committally. Claim-jumping gossip is as common as lice, but sometimes a detail matters. Historians will later debate whether laundrymen like you significantly impacted frontier crime rates merely by passing overheard intel to the right ears. Some argue yes, citing diaries where washerfolk are credited with thwarting raids. Others insist it's romantic myth. Tonight, myth and reality mingle like soap and clay in Mulroney's cuffs. Once his bundle stews, you fish out a notebook labeled Night Tattle and jot a few keywords: ridge, dynamite, full moon, then stash it behind a loose beam. Maylene glances over, raises an eyebrow. You shrug. Information dries faster than linen when written. Midway through the second boil, Dolly McGraw drifts in, velvet waistcoat now sporting an unexplained tear near the hem. She isn't here for laundry. She's here for sanctuary. Game ran long, she whispers, eyes flicking to the door. You gesture at a stool near the stove. She sinks into it, producing a nickel harmonica and breathing out a scale so wistful it turns steam into sighs. Between notes she relays half-sentences about a card sharp named Chicago Vince who's carrying IOUs fatter than pancake stacks and may be planning a hush-hush stagecoach heist to settle them. You file the nugget. Quirky side note you'll scribble later. Some frontier stage lines require drivers to wear laundry-bright neckerchiefs so passengers could see them in moonlight and not panic. A dress code born of practicality, not fashion. Whether Chicago Vince knows that is unclear. Past midnight, you take the drum extractor outside. Fresh air plus less rafter-shaking racket. Lantern hung on a post casts latticed shadows as you crank. Each rotation flings water like comets across the yard, spattering the weed patch until it gleams. From this vantage you have a panoramic audition of town secrets. A muffled argument behind the assay office, mule hooves pacing nervously near the stable, the faint metallic click of revolver hammers being thumbed back then quietly uncocked when footsteps pass. The night is teaching itself to whisper in every key. You return inside to find Maylene bent over a letter penned in careful strokes. English on one side, Chinese on the other. She's practicing, she says, drafting a formal partnership contract that names her equal co-owner. You grin approval. She's earned it tenfold. Mainstream historical footnote. While Chinese men flooded the diggings, records of Chinese women in Gold Rush, California are notoriously sparse and fragmentary, leaving historians to argue heatedly over how many actually arrived and what roles they played. One camp claims laundries like yours relied heavily on their expertise behind the scenes. Another calls that speculation spun from a few newspaper anecdotes. Your ledger, if preserved, will tilt the balance. As the hour grows owl-hoarse, a trio of Mexican vaqueros edges through the door cradling a tarp-wrapped something. Necesitamos un favor, the leader says, need a favor. They unwrap a rawhide saddle slick with an odd, black stain that smells metallic. They want it scoured before dawn to erase, or at least confuse, suspicious eyes. Historians still debate whether launderers technically abetted crimes by erasing evidence. You decide moral calculus can wait until linen's soap ratio reaches equilibrium. You price the job steeply, $5 knowing they'll pay. They do. You hand them a claim ticket and dunk the saddle in a lilite solution heavy on cedar oil to mask both odor and conscience. Night deepens. Lantern fuel wanes. You bank the fire, crack the door for a cooling draft, and that's when whispers become audible, real whispers, not the metaphorical kind. You gesture Maylene to snuff the lantern. Through a sliver in the wall you spy shapes near Beaufort's drum outside. Two figures with burlap sacks and a pry bar, murmuring about loading the gear into Vince's wagon come dawn. A stagecoach plan plus stolen extractor equals motive squared. You step quietly onto the plank deck, paddle in hand. Maylene slips behind them like smoke, brandishing a half-solid soap slab. Impact rated, she jokes later. You clear your throat. Thieves whirl. Moonlight picks out Chicago Vince's crooked grin and a scrawny accomplice you recognize as a disgruntled ex-steam laundry stoker. Evening rinse cycle. You quip. Vince lifts the pry bar. You raise the paddle. Before blood can trump banter, Dolly appears at the doorway, lantern blazing, pistol leveled with gambler's poise. Vince freezes, calculating odds of 3-2 versus the house. He folds. Maylene relieves him of the pry bar with a swift twist. Kung fu training courtesy of hauling cauldrons, you like to think. You march the would-be bandits to the constable, whose office now reeks of wet concrete from storing counterfeit soap earlier that week. Statements given, bandits locked. You return to the shack with Dolly, who holsters her weapon and asks for a cup of chicory to steady post-adrenaline shakes. Over mugs, she admits whispering intentionally loud earlier. Bait to flush Vince into the open. You were her honest muscle, she says. You laugh, flexing sudsy biceps. An alliance forged of soap and subterfuge, scholars in criminology will later call such civilian networks proto-community policing, though the term feels too tidy for nights like this. Near dawn, you hang the vaquero's saddle to dry, satisfied the stain, and any incriminating glint has vanished beneath supple leather and cedar scent. The saddle glows deep umber under firelight, almost regal. You remember reading in a discarded newspaper that Queen Victoria's own riding tack was cleaned with a mixture of soap flakes and melted beeswax, highborn and lowborn, united by laundry chemistry. Sunrise pinks the windows. Night shift officially ends, but work merely flips the hourglass. You tally the ledger, 24 bundles laundered, 15 rumors logged, 2 crimes averted, 1 extractor saved, 0 explosions. Not bad for moonlit labor. You tack a fresh page labeled whispers and wagers behind the counter. Future historians will argue whether this makes you a journalist or a spy. Mulrooney shuffles back, wide-eyed. Widow's Ridge claim flooded overnight, he reports. Dynamite plan aborted. Seems your scribbles won't be needed, but the notebook stays. Next time maybe it's floodlines that shift. You stretch, joints creaking like old floorboards, and notice Beaufort's drum secure beneath an improvised chain lock. Soap currency paid the blacksmith for that. 2. Maylene emerges from the rear, where she'd sneaked a half-hour of sleep atop folded flannels, and hands you a bowl of rice porridge stirred with cinnamon shavings, a breakfast bridging continents. You clink spoons in salute, and somewhere outside a lone rooster crows, belated and off-key, as if embarrassed to announce daylight after so much nocturnal drama. There's no time for a victory nap. Wagons roll in, children yawn their way to the bucket chain, and Moby Tub demands stoking. Still, you pause by the doorway, watching dawn gild puddles left by last night's spin cycle. For a moment you see overlapping circles. Water rings, rumor rings, the concentric carving on the Miwok Elder's stone. All those ripples expanding outward, carrying secrets, cleansed memories, maybe even justice. The historian in your future reader will wonder whether you felt history pivot under your boots at times like this. The answer is simpler. You felt the floor vibrate, from laundries, from gossip, from the heartbeat of a town that never really slept. You step back inside, shoulder the paddle, and tap Moby Tub's rim like a maestro lifting baton. Second verse, same as the first, you mutter. Steam rises obediently, and the day shift begins, though night's whispers still swirl in every bubble. Somewhere between the hiss of anthracite and the thrum of Beaufort's drum, you realize the laundry never just cleans fabric. It wrings out the town's conscience, hangs it where everyone can see, if they stay up late enough. Payday in Hangtown arrives like an excited puppy. Muddy paws everywhere, teeth on your boots, and a wagging tail that might knock over the furniture. It is the one day each fortnight when pick handles still, sluice boxes stand abandoned, and every miner tromps into town with a flour bag full of hope. You wake before dawn to the metallic heartbeat of scale pans ringing in the street. Already a queue coils outside the assay office like a brass snake hungry for kerosene lamps. Your own doorway isn't immune. Bundles of laundry appear as if spawned by moonlight, each tagged with hastily penciled promises of payment imminent. You sip chicory and eye the mountain of obligations with the sinking certainty that gold dust will soon flood your counter like confetti in a hurricane. The first customer is a Cornish tin miner named Ephraim, mustache drooping like wet tassels. He slaps 2 handkerchiefs onto the plank and spills a vial of dust that sparkles suspiciously bright. You tap the rim with your paddle. The grains jingle, Not a good sign. Sure enough, closer inspection reveals not pure gold, but a cocktail of brass shavings shaved off lamp fittings. Mainstream fact. Newspapers of 1851 lamented rampant, pinch-penny adulteration, wherein miners laced authentic flakes with brass to stretch wages. You slide the vial back and quote a contamination surcharge. Ephraim sighs, produces real dust from a second pouch, and mutters about honest men forced to cheat by crooked luck. You note the irony and add a doodle of a brass mustache in your ledger. Next up waddles Hefty Lou, pockets bulging like homemade Christmas stockings. She's ferrying her syndicate's fortnight haul. 3 pounds of gold mud-sealed inside a tobacco tin. Problem. Someone stored toenail clippings in the same tin, and now the mixture looks like a prospector's trail mix. Odd but verifiable footnote. A Harper's Weekly correspondent indeed recorded miners using trimmed nails to gauge dust depth in vials. Apparently nails float. You provide tweezers, charge extraction fees, and spend half an hour plucking keratin from precious metal while Lou treats you to the latest rumor. Sacramento bankers may finally ship minted coin upriver any day now. Historians still debate how many such shipments were promised versus delivered. Ledgers conflict, diaries sigh. You chalk the claim under myth category. Recurring. The rush accelerates. A Chilean duo attempts to settle a 12-shirt bill with a leather purse containing nuggets the size of raisins but polished nearly white. Your acid test fizzes like angry champagne, lead pellets. You refuse politely. They grimace in tandem, then produce a stamped Mexican 8 reals coin. Silver worn paper thin yet undeniably legitimate. You accept, grateful, and tuck it into the strongbox like a rare bird egg. Hard currency feels oddly lightweight after weeks of handling gravel masquerading as wealth. Around noon your shop resembles an assay floor. Scorched spoons for testing vinegar bowls, feathers for dusting scales, and a growing heap of questionable pay. Maylene builds a triage station. Gold? Maybe gold, absolutely not. And mans it like a stern librarian. She plucks a flake with chopsticks, squints, declares mica, and sweeps it to the rejection pile. Despite the efficiency, tempers outside rise. Miners argue over cue cutting, accuse each other of dust fluffing. A frontier insult implying you blow sawdust into the scales for heft. When a shove graduates into a fist, you wrap Moby Tubbs' iron rim with a ladle. The clang reverberates down the alley, silencing scuffles faster than civic preaching. You remind everyone that dirt fights track mud into your rinse water. Unforgivable. Order restored for now. Mid-afternoon, the long-anticipated Wells Fargo stage finally rattles into town, guarded by 2 riflemen and 1 surly bulldog. A cheer erupts. Inside, rumor insists, gleam stacks of double eagles fresh from the San Francisco Mint. The banker aboard unfurls a clipboard, announces exchange rates. $20 face for an ounce of dust minus $3, handling and assay. The crowd groans. $3 is a week's beans. Economic textbooks will later cite such lopsided spreads as catalysts for local currencies. Soap, for instance. You smirk, remembering your turtle bars quietly snug in a backroom crate. But the temptation of coin proves too shiny for many. They jostle forward, dust bags sloshing. You watch the line snake and do quick math. If each miner loses $3 an ounce, Hangtown exports enough value in one afternoon to buy a locomotive. Your inner economist fumes. So when Dolly McGraw tiptoes behind the counter suggesting a pop-up exchange booth, offering better rates, payment in soap certificates redeemable for goods, you hesitate only a breath. You chalk a sign. Laundry ledger exchange, 10% fee, not 15%. Within minutes, a splinter queue forms at your door, mainly the disgruntled and the thrifty. You set scales, verify dust, and issue handwritten chits redeemable for laundry, soap, or partnership store credits. It's chaotic yet strangely satisfying. Each transaction feels like rescuing cents from corporate jaws. Scholars will later argue whether such grassroots banking undermined or stabilized frontier economies. One camp will hail you as a proto-microfinancier. Another will accuse you of inflation poisoning. In the moment, you're simply ensuring socks still come in pairs and stew still meets the bowl. The day's strangest payment lands near sunset. A prospector from Bavaria, eyes wild with delight, slams a cloth parcel onto the bench. Inside, tiny gold figurines shaped like squirrels. He carved them, he explains, during lonely sluice shifts, packing raw flakes into a homemade die. They're 90% pure, he swears. Melt value is fine, you reply, but weight matters. You weigh one figurine, near half an ounce. You agree on a blanket washing credit plus a future exhibit spot on your mantle. How often does one wash a squirrel made of sunrise? Just as you log that eccentricity, the banker storms in, red-faced, waving a notice about unauthorized currency competition. He threatens fines, citations, perhaps jail. You counter, your exchange is barter, not banking, no usury, just service in kind. Maylene calmly produces yesterday's legal ledger citing California's still loose financial statutes. The banker harumphs, warns the legislature will tighten screws, and departs trailing cigar smoke and wounded pride. You stamp a fresh chit, feeling oddly victorious. Night's edge approaches with the subtlety of a thrown horseshoe. You tally. Dusty pouches emptied, counterfeit trinkets discarded. Genuine coin clinks satisfyingly in the strongbox. Yet profits hide a snag. Your floor now glimmers with stray specks, wolves in golden clothing. The broom won't touch them. Dust clouds blind. You recall a nifty trick from an 1848 mining pamphlet. Spread thick felt soaked in lamp oil. Gold, being heavy, sticks. You improvise with a wool blanket. By lantern glow you shake it later and harvest a teaspoon of orphan flakes, worth maybe $5. Small fortunes slip through cracks if you don't sweep creatively. Economists might call it capture of leakage. You call it bedtime fund. As you bolt the door, Maylene yawns and wonders aloud if someday banks will pay you to manage their ledgers. You imagine a marble building where clerks in starched collars stamp turtle seals on parchment. Absurd, maybe, but so was paying rent with soap a month ago. You file the thought under wild, keep watching. Before sleep, you sort the day's oddities into the caution box. Brass shavings, toenail flecks, lead pellets, a failed mica glimmer. You add a note. Fraud sings sweetest at payday. Historians will later mine such notes for social data. You write them to keep your gullibility on a leash. Outside, coins jingle in tavern tills, dust pouches lighten, and somewhere the banker counts profits by the glow of a too-bright lamp. Payday in Hangtown is equal parts jubilee and judgment, a grand sorting of false glitter from hard shine. And you, washer of sins and shirts alike, stand mid-current with a ladle, scooping truth from sludge. Tomorrow the dust will settle literally and figuratively. Miners will return to holes, and clothes will return to your tub bearing fresh sins. But tonight you pocket a gold squirrel, extinguish the lantern, and marvel at the strange arithmetic of the frontier, where misery and money weigh exactly the same until you rinse them under honest water. Pay Saturday flings itself over Hangtown like a deck of freshly shuffled cards. Faces up, fortunes down. Nobody sure who'll keep the aces when the dust settles. Even before sunrise the town hums at a nervous, tin-pan frequency. Clinks of scale weights, throaty yells over assay values, and the steady tattoo of boots pacing mud that still remembers last night's rain. You step onto the plank walk and nearly skid on a gleaming silver dollar someone skipped across a puddle for luck. It winks in the torchlight, unnoticed by any of the wide-eyed diggers shuffling toward the assay office. You fish it out, flick water from the relief, and tuck it into your apron. One more orphan coin looking for a story. Inside, Maylene already has the coal roaring under Moby tub. Sparks swirl up the flue like caffeinated fireflies, and the big iron thermometer, your recent replacement after that memorable near explosion, slides past the 180-degree mark with the lazy confidence of a cat stretching in sunlight. She throws you a quick three-finger salute, her silent shorthand for fuel steady, water-topped, cauldron ready. You answer with a thumbs-up, sip gritty chicory, and brace for the tidal wave of fortune-fresh laundry that always follows the clang of payday scales. Sure enough, Baden Wilhelm barrels in first, a Prussian clockmaker whose beard looks like it ticks. He unrolls 3 linen dusters so stiff they audibly crack and pays, with great ceremony. In a rose gold gear he swears will someday adorn a lady's kerchief. You wonder where precisely one pins a gear on a kerchief, but gold is gold. Deal struck. You tag his bundle and slide it into the swelling morning queue. From there the day spirals into a carnival of oddities. Little mossy peat hauls in burlap sacks full of placer vials he once washed. Arsenic traces from creative refining have left the dust unnaturally radiant. You agree to a lemon juice rinse that'll sluice off the fake sparkle, and half his bravado. Pete sighs, but pride is cheaper than legal trouble, so he signs. Outside, a hush ripples through Main Street as a crimson Wells Fargo coach rattles to the banker's pavilion. 2 riflemen hop down. An iron chest follows with a thunk that could crack bedrock. In minutes a poster appears. Dustio coin exchange. 14% convenience fee. The groan that rises is half outrage, half resignation. Gold may weigh heavy, but desperation always travels faster. Maylene catches your eye. Opportunity sails in on other people's frustration. She grabs a chalk fragment and sketches a fresh placard for the shopfront. Fair trade laundry exchange. Only 6%, soap-backed security. No bullet points, no tight timetable. Just a promise painted in big confident loops. Within moments a second queue forms. This one snaking past your door instead of the bank's. You decide that if miners will trust you with their socks, they'll trust you with their scales too. On a side table you set up a ramshackle calibration corner. A jeweler's loop, proper brass weights, a file for shaving burrs, and a tiny bowl of soap chips as thank yous. Folks shuffle forward clutching pocket balances warped by bad roads and wishful thinking. You true them one by one, explaining that an honest scale today means fewer fistfights tonight. Each recalibrated balance buys a moment of calm, and a soap chip stashed into a grateful pocket. Economists who will later sift through diaries argue the West's real currency wasn't dust or dollars but reputation you could bank on. From the way relieved miners beam at their newly leveled pans, you sense those future academics are onto something. Inside, the shop turns into an impromptu counting house. Maylene weighs deposits, dust, thumbnail nuggets, the occasional worn silver peso, and scrawls blue rag paper certificates in return. To ordinary eyes the script shows a proud squirrel raising a washboard. Tilted toward lamplight and a rice grain watermark flashes the Chinese character Xin. Trust, smaller than a flea's shadow. Every time she dots the final stroke, the banker across the street glares so hard you half expect his monocle to melt. Around noon a knot of Gambesino miners arrives, herding a bleeding goat as their security deposit. Bank fees would swallow their pooled savings for machinery parts, but a goat, they reason, holds value in milk and weed maintenance. You shrug. Milk foams nicely atop chicory, and draft a certificate pegged to one healthy nanny, unnamed. Historians will chuckle over livestock-backed credit. You merely tie the goat in alley 2 and thank it for future cappuccinos. Drizzle drifts in mid-afternoon, tamping dust and sharpening smells. Rain-damp pine, hot coal, and a fresh top note of indignation wafting from the banker's pavilion. It seems your 6% fee siphoned half his clientele. He retaliates with a handbill titled Beware the Soap Script Speculator, handed out by Ephraim the brass mixer. The pamphlet accuses you of undermining sound money principles, with scented script fit only for bubble baths. You read it aloud to waiting customers. They howl, pockets jingling with the banker's own overpriced coin. Ephraim retreats when 30 miners brandish soap bars like throwing daggers. Late afternoon, the banker himself stomps into your shop, coat-tails snapping like angry bunting. The herbal steam of mugwort and cedar does nothing to soothe him. He declares your certificates unregulated. You slide one across the counter, offer half off his next laundry bundle if he drops his fee to single digits for the remainder of the day. His eyes dart to the throng lining your doorway, then back to the emptier space outside his tent. After a brief, silent calculation he lowers his commission to 8%. Victory in Hangtown always smells faintly of soap and goat hair. Just as you're savoring that win, the Miwok elder appears carrying a reed basket. She's heard chimney bricks on your roof have wept arsenic crystals, side effect of cheap Eastern laundry powders doped with rat-killing additives. Without fuss, she hands you a clutch of marsh reeds, roots still damp. Plant them where smoke leaks, she says. They drink the poison. Modern botanists will one day confirm bulrush species mop up heavy metals, pioneering phytoremediation long before the term exists. Tonight, you and Maylene fetch 2 buckets, dig into chimney-side mud, and nestle the reeds like green candles warding off ghosts. Twilight slips toward indigo. You tally the haul. 21 squirrel certificates issued, 3 jars of goat milk already cooling, a rose gold gear glinting beside the strongbox, and precisely 1.8 ounces of dust reserved as a trust fund. In Alley 2, the goat tests a laundry note between its teeth. Paper survives, ink smudges a bit, trust holds. Before you douse the lamps, you log the day's lessons in your grease-smudged journal. No tidy bullet lists, just winding sentences that breathe like you do. Fair scales soothe tempers. Fancy fees breed rebellion. A goat tied behind a laundry may be the safest vault in California. Reeds can turn poison into silence. And a sheet of blue rag paper, if inked with faith and a cheeky squirrel, just might weigh more than a minted double eagle. Then you stash the silver dollar and stray nugget in a jar labeled Town Karma, bank the fire, and stretch across a cot that creaks under the new arithmetic of the frontier. One where soap, trust, and a dash of moss-green ingenuity can scrub even a payday clean. Dawn creeps in late and sulky, as though it, too, overslept after yesterday's payday theatrics. You're up before it, poking embers under Moby tub while the goat, finally christened Dividend, chews through a coil of rope it finds philosophically restricting. Outside, Hangtown sounds hungover. One saloon pianist still hitting the wrong half of "Oh, Susanna." A banker's clerk coughing coin dust, and somewhere the restless squeal of metal on metal that means some fool is trying to fire up steam machinery before the coffee boils. The fool turns out not to be a fool at all, but Mr. Calvin Penniman, late of Boston, who has arrived with a wagon full of shiny sheet iron panels and a glint in his monocled eye. By mid-morning he's erected a clapboard shed across the creek and unveiled what he calls the lightning laundry. A coal-fired, belt-driven behemoth promising to clean 40 shirts an hour. No elbow grease required. Its smokestack belches theatrical black spirals, and its polished brass dials catch sunbeams that stab the gloom like gossip knives. You watch from your porch, mugwort-scented steam framing your face, part admiration, part dread. Competition was inevitable. You just didn't expect it to wear a bow tie and quote Emerson while adjusting pressure gauges. Penniman announces opening specials. First bundle half price, every 5th sock free, and a ripple shivers through the queue outside your door. A few miners peel off, lured by novelty. Even Dividend pauses, chewing to stare. Maylene studies the device, arms folded. "Machine eats wood like dragon," she mutters. And you know she's right. One glance at Penniman's coal pile, already dented, tells you the lightning laundry will burn through fuel faster than Hangtown burns through rumors. Still, speed sells. You need a counterstroke, something equal parts practical and showy. Opportunity thumps inside at noon, wearing a uniform. Deputy Census Agent Willis Fraser, clipboard, spectacles, and a lank expression like a wilted lily, returns to finish his sanitation metrics. Government inspectors, it seems, actually are coming, armed with rubrics long enough to wallpaper the constable's cell. Fraser flips pages, noting tub temperatures, soap inventories, even the width of your drying lines, 2 thumbs wider than federal standard. A happy accident you pretend was deliberate. He scribbles, nods, and finally murmurs, "Preliminary marks. Exemplary." Just then, a hiss and a bang crack over the creek. Penniman's prototype ejects a plume of steam so loud pigeons evacuate every roof in town. Fraser jumps. You invite him for mugwort tea, while we wait to see if anyone explodes. Over cups he confides that official ratings will consider not only output but also injury reports and environmental soot levels. Your goat-powered reed filter and low-pressure regimen suddenly look like exam answers Penniman forgot to study. Mainstream historical fact. Early industrial laundries in California indeed racked up burn accidents at twice the rate of hand operations, but newspapers downplayed it to keep creditors calm. Scholars still wrangle over the exact casualty figures. Fraser departs just as an ashen-faced boy sprints over. Penniman requests emergency soap. His machines lie injector jammed, and his Boston imported cakes dissolved into mush during transit. You could laugh. Instead you see leverage. You send back 2 turtle bars stamped with the trust character, and a polite note quoting retail price plus a first-time competitor surcharge. Legend later claims you included a sympathy smiley face. Academic articles lack consensus. By evening, the Lightning Laundry's debut looks less lightning, more drizzle. Soot-streaked collars, half-scorched socks, and one truly tragic pair of silk drawers now sporting gear-tooth impressions. Penniman gamely apologizes, offering vouchers, but minors slouch toward your doorway muttering that at least soap currency doesn't bite holes. You treat them gently, waiving late fees and passing out goat milk biscuits. Dividend earns its keep. Still, you sense a longer war. Penniman's machine may falter now, yet give him a month of tweaks and deep pockets, and those brass gears could hum smoothly enough to shave your margins. You need not just reliability but spectacle. Proof handcrafted suds can tango with iron. Maylene's eyes sparkle. Steam has whistle, we have show. She proposes a public demonstration of natural dye stain removal, starring the infamous magnesium-speckled doctor's coat as Exhibit A. Crowd loves a redemption arc. You schedule the event for Sunday afternoon on the boarding house porch. Posters bloom overnight with bold letters. Dirt trauma drama. Watch the miracle rinse. No timetable, no bullet lists, just an open invitation to gawk. Sunday arrives warm, townsfolk cluster, popcorn style, around washboards and benches. Even Penniman lurks under his bowler, arms crossed. Maylene narrates while you work. You dunk the tortured frock in a clear cauldron, adding measured scoops of herbal soap, a swirl of vinegar, and showstopper, a handful of crushed camellia blossoms that hiss green, releasing tea-colored whirls. Gasps ripple. 5 minutes of gentle paddling later, you hoist the coat. White as good intentions, smelling faintly of spring rain. A preacher bellows hallelujah. The banker's monocle fogs. You bow, hand the coat to the physician, and the crowd erupts in applause that bounces off pine trunks. One mainstream knowledge nugget delivered live. Camellia saponins can bond with metallic residues, a trick borrowed from Cantonese silk washers. Maylene slips in the scholarly caveat. Chemists still dispute whether blossom enzymes or sheer agitation does the heavy lifting. Unsure? Replicate at home and argue in the comments. Folks. Penniman tries a riposte. He drags up a crate of filthy linens, feeds them into his drum, and cranks pressure. Steam shrieks. Dials jitter. 10 minutes later, garments emerge mostly clean, but one cotton chemise has shrunk to doll size, and a wool vest smells like scorched mutton. Audience titters. Penniman vows optimizations. But your demonstration has already stitched itself into Hangtown lore. That night, business booms. You and Maylene scour until knuckles prune, Beaufort's drum spinning steady with its new barrel hoop bones, and Dividend exhaling grassy sighs between mouthfuls of unwanted poster scraps. While draping final shirts, you notice your fingertips hum with residual applause. Showmanship, you realize, might be the frontier's real renewable fuel. Yet victory doesn't pay the woodman. Coal prices climb after a landslide blocks the mountain spur trail, and rumors say Penniman's Boston backers have secured a rail contract to freight anthracite by the ton once snows melt. Your edge must broaden. Cue Old Kong, who arrives next dawn with a woven pouch of indigo black seeds. He explains. Pressed into cakes, these seeds yield an oil that burns hot and near smokeless, perfect for laundries. Historians later label it Chinese tallow tree seed. Botanists debate when it first reached California, some citing Kong as patient zero, others claiming Spanish missionaries beat him by decades. You arrange a barter. Half the first batch of seed cakes in exchange for goat fertilizer and reed cuttings Kong covets for herbal salves. Circular economy before it's a buzzword. Midweek, a telegraph crew trudges into town, spools of copper wire on their backs. They plan to string a line through the Sierra Pass and need temporary lodging and laundry during construction. Their foreman, a wiry Ohioan with finger blisters the color of rust, negotiates a bulk communications package. Uniforms washed nightly, while socks mended, and each man issued 2 turtle bars in lieu of coin. In exchange, they'll teach you to tap a straight key and will transmit one short message free per week. You accept. Suddenly, global reach nests beside goat pen. Scholars will later argue this telegraph hookup fast-tracked Hangtown's evolution from muddy boomlet to regional hub. Others insist it mostly sped up poker smack talk. You test the key that evening, sending a 5-word greeting to Sacramento. Hangtown scrubs cleaner than lightning. The reply clacks back an hour later. Define lightning. Stop. Curious. You pin the strip beside your ledger, trophy-sized. Penniman, sensing momentum shifting, invites you to coffee. He confesses his investors expected quick monopoly, not folk heroes with goats. He proposes a truce, a joint venture combining his mechanical throughput with your quality control, splitting profits and coal bills. Tempting, but memory of scorched chemise hovers. You counter. He may rent your soap formula for a licensing fee and agree to post safety notices citing your methods. He winces pride or math and asks for a night to ponder. Historians later dissect this negotiation as early evidence of franchising on the Pacific frontier. Letters survive but disagree on who blinked first. That same night, the goat knocks over the seed oil press, coating the floor in slick sheen. You slip, land backside first, and in that undignified sprawl, a eureka spark ignites. If oil cakes burn smokeless, why not power a small rotary heater for Beaufort's drum, freeing you from coal entirely? The idea keeps you awake till dawn, sketching cogs on feed sacks, laughter shaking you whenever dividend snorts approval from the corner. Morning brings Fraser again, crisp and curious. He informs you Hangtown outranks neighboring camps on preliminary hygiene tallies. 0 boiler accidents, low soot index, and a goat he still can't explain. This earns the town a visit from the Territorial Health Board. Politicians, you chuckle, can't resist a clean photo op. But the inspection is 2 weeks out. Time enough for reeds to root and Penniman either to partner or self-destruct. You close the chapter, day's ledger ink still wet, telegraph wire humming above the roof, dividend chewing a prototype oil cake like Thunder Insurance, and jot an entry in the caution box. Progress rides twin horses, one swift, one steady. Hitch to both or walk. The scholars of tomorrow may embroider footnotes, bankers may pencil profit curves, Penniman may fine-tune his pistons, but tonight, steam over Hangtown carries a different whistle. Acknowledgement that muscle and machine, barter and spark, goat and wire, might just share the same wide trough without drowning each other. The day breaks sharp and blue, as if someone scrubbed the sky overnight with your best camellia soap and hung it out to dry. 2 weeks have galloped by since the Lightning Laundry's smoky debut, and Hangtown has settled into a curious equilibrium. Your reed-rimmed chimney exhales nothing more toxic than the occasional whiff of cinnamon-laced steam, while Penniman's sheet iron juggernaut across the creek snorts and wheezes like a steel bull that only half remembers how to charge. You're up before dividend the goat can knock over anything valuable, fine-tuning the seed oil heater that now squats beneath Beaufort's centrifugal drum. The design is laughably simple: an iron trough, a wick made from retired flannel, and compressed cakes of Chinese tallow tree seed. But the flame it produces burns clear, hot, and almost entirely smoke-free. It also smells vaguely of toasted chestnuts, which may explain why half the town wandered past yesterday sniffing the air like confused squirrels. Maylene, crouched beside you, adjusts an airflow vent with chopsticks and pronounces the draft balanced. For a moment you imagine patent drawings dancing across official paper in Washington, D.C. Then the thought scampers away, chased by the reality of unfinished orders stacked like geological strata behind you. Before you can reach for the first bundle, the telegraph key on the counter chatters a frantic SOS. You translate the clicks: Valley Fever Outbreak, Big Cedar Camp, send clean linen plus carbolic soap urgent. Big Cedar sits only 15 miles upriver. News of disease travels faster down wire than downwind, and you feel the room's temperature dip despite the heater's glow. Mainstream fact: dysentery and what locals dubbed valley fever, likely cholera, ripped through mining camps in the early 1850s. Their spread blamed on everything from night vapors to demons in bad whiskey. Modern epidemiologists will point to tainted water and poor sanitation, but back then germ theory still lurked 2 decades in the future. leaving everyone to improvise. You and Maylene improvise at sprint speed. First you assemble a relief pack. 50 carbolic bars Dr. Peabody traded last month, 20 freshly boiled sheets, and a tin of seed oil salve Kong swears calms rashes. Dividing labor, you haul the chest to the mule yard while Maylene drafts telegraph replies promising additional shipments. The muleteer, a laconic Yokuts man nicknamed Riverjack, agrees to ride at dusk when the heat dips, fee payable in 2 turtle bars and 1 goat milk biscuit, fast becoming Hangtown's secondary dessert standard. Back at the shack, the morning queue gathers. Word of sickness in Big Cedar spreads faster than lie. Nobody wants plague stains on their cuffs. You reassure patrons that soap kills most everything visible and plenty invisible besides. A few scoff, muttering about miasmas. One claims chewing charcoal biscuits keeps bad air away. Quirky? Yes, but newspapers from 1852 really did push charcoal as a cure-all. You hand him an extra bar and suggest double insurance. Penniman chooses that tense moment to stride over in all his bow-tied optimism. He announces he's ready to sign a licensing deal for your soap, but only if you agree to supply him double rations at yesterday's price. You counter that shortage looms thanks to relief shipments, so rates must rise, or he can learn seed oil chemistry himself. His monocle trembles. He storms off muttering about charitable extortion. You jot the phrase in your pocket notebook. Might make a fine chapter title someday. Just then, Deputy Fraser materializes with the Territorial Health Board. 3 commissioners in starch so stiff the collars threaten to saw off their own heads. They brandish clipboards engraved with an eagle you suspect has never met dust. Fraser beams, reminding you that Hangtown leads the region's cleanliness index, pending today's final audit. You usher them inside. The goat bleats a skeptical welcome, and Maylene serves pine needle water in polished tin cups. The inspection proceeds like a slow quadrille. Commissioners measure water temperature, peer at reed roots sucking toxins near your chimney, and raise eyebrows at the goat latched to a post labeled dividend. One notes that livestock in workspaces violate some clause. You respond that dividend is technically an asset-backed security providing both sanitation, weed control, and nutritional dividends, milk biscuits. The absurdity cracks a smile on the youngest commissioner's face. She scribbles, innovative bioutilization, instead of goat indoors. Mid-audit, the telegraph key clacks again. 3 dead Big Cedar. Request Dr. Plus clean water barrels. Dr. Peabody, coincidentally present to polish his magnesium-revived frock coat, volunteers on the spot. You hand him half your reed seedlings and a notebook of river sand filter sketches. He rides out with Riverjack by late afternoon, medicine bag clinking like a broken wind chime. Historians will one day argue whether these improvised hygiene kits actually slowed the outbreak. Some credit Peabody's phenol soap, others blame a coincidental cold snap. The debate never settles, but diaries from Big Cedar consistently mention the soap from Hangtown that smelled like truth. Commissioners, impressed by live crisis management, wrap up their survey early. Preliminary score, highest sanitation rating north of Stockton. They award a provisional plaque, planed redwood etched with a bear holding laundry tongs, and promise funding for a small infirmary if standards hold 6 more months. The plaque earns prime real estate above the ledger. Penniman's steam whistle screeches in jealous salute from across the creek. At twilight, Maylene lights the seed oil heater for a full stress test while you draft a public notice. Free soap use workshop tomorrow. Learn to boil, beat, and banish germs. You pin it beneath the plaque, aware some minors can't read. Still, word travels by sheer curiosity. Dividend nudges the parchment, leaving a tiny milk mustache as official goat approval. Night drapes in, bringing with it a hush more solemn than earlier paydays. Taverns run half laughter. Folks sip whiskey slower, mindful of distant fevers. You double-check every barrel lid, every lye crate, every reed line, then finally wander outside for air. Overhead, new telegraph wires hum like taut fiddle strings in a gentle breeze. You tap one experimentally. Vibration thrums down to the key inside. Hangtown's heartbeat set to Morse. Penniman waits by the bridge, hands buried deep in coat pockets. He confesses Big Cedar's plight rattled his investors. They fear his high-pressure model could turn boilers into shrapnel when camps are desperate for safety. He proposes again. Partner fully. Combine his mechanics with your protocols. Share profits and liabilities 50-50. Tonight, with sick miners upriver and politicians courting you, leverage tilts heavily your way. Still, you sense the wisdom of harnessing horsepower rather than watching it trample you later. You extend a calloused hand. Partnership conditional on safety valves, low heat cycles, and your final say on chemical mixes. Penniman hesitates, then grips your hand like a man grabbing a life ring. A mainstream business historian in 1910 will cite this handshake as an early cross-cultural joint venture blending artisanal knowledge with proto-industrial scale. Academic sniping ensues over whether the agreement truly democratized technology or merely delayed inevitable mechanization. Whatever the verdict, the handshake feels solid as a cast-iron washboard. You celebrate the treaty with a clink of tin mugs filled from Dividend's evening milk yield frothed over chicory. It tastes partly of chestnuts, partly of possibility. Maylene joins, producing the very first printed batch of squirrel certificates fresh from the boarding house press. Crisp indigo ink, watermark rice grains sparkling under lamplight. Each bill now carries a line of telegraph code, -- for CLEAN. A flourish Kong suggested to confuse counterfeiters. Holding the note at arm's length, you feel its subtle weight. Promise backed not by gold alone but by scrubbed hands, rooted reeds, and a goat named after prophet. When you finally collapse on the cot, the plaque's bare silhouette watches from the wall, telegraph wires whisper lullabies overhead, and somewhere upriver a mule steps carefully through dark pines carrying soap that smells like trust. Tomorrow more sickness may ride the river current. Steam gauges may flirt with red lines. Inspectors may return with stricter forms. Yet tonight, Hangtown breathes a little easier because laundry stopped being just an errand and started behaving like infrastructure. Woven from goat hair, marsh reeds, seed oil, and determined human hands. You drift towards sleep with a final thought scribbling itself across your tired brain. The frontier doesn't wait for theories. It builds them from whatever's in the bucket. Historians can argue footnotes centuries hence. For now, you'll keep the buckets clean, the soap honest, and the wires humming. Daybreak crooks a golden finger over the ridge, and Hangtown answers with a yawn that smells of seed oil flame and goat's milk froth. You roll off the cot, nudge Dividend away from the new stack of reed mats, and spend 5 groggy seconds remembering why there's a half-assembled copper valve on your bedside crate. Penniman's pressure regulator, the last missing rib in your newly forged partnership. Somewhere in the night you'd promised him final installation by dawn. Somewhere in the same night he'd fallen asleep on a coal pile mumbling Emerson quotes. You rub grit from your eyes, tuck the valve under your arm, and head across the creek to keep faith with the iron beast now half-tamed by your safety rules. Penniman's sheet iron juggernaut stands quiet, dew glistening on brass gauges like nervous sweat. The stovepipe exhales a polite puff, no more belching. He greets you, coal dust smudged across the bow tie, and together you bolt the regulator into place. When you ease the steam lever open, the gauge needle climbs to safe and pauses like a dog finally trained to heel. You pat the drum housing. Partnership, you muse, is just diplomacy between moving parts. Back across the creek, the telegraph key chatters with mixed news. Big cedar fever cases have stabilized, Peabody credits reed filters and strict soap rations. But a second camp upriver, Widow's Spur, reports the first symptoms. You and Maylene set an automatic schedule. Every outbound mule now carries double bundles of carbolic bars, fresh linens, and seed oil salve. Every inbound mule hauls back soiled sheets sealed in oilcloth for your high-heat cauldron. Without realizing it, you've invented a supply chain. Future public health scholars will cite Hangtown's mule relay as an early example of decentralized quarantine logistics. One critic will insist it was just common sense with hooves. Mid-morning, the Territorial Health Board returns, this time escorting a photographer whose box camera looks large enough to scrub its own shirts. They want an image for Sacramento newspapers, the cleanest laundry on the Sierra front. You'd prefer a day's notice, but mud waits for no lens. Maylene ties back her braid. Dividend gets a brisk brush down, and you position the seed oil heater so its blue flame flickers heroically behind you. When the photographer pulls off the lens cap, you're caught mid-swirl, lifting a sheet from Moby Tub. steam haloing your head like you've just baptized the frontier in soap. The shutter clicks. History inhales a whiff of mugwort. Years later, restorers will hand-tint the print and marvel that no soot blotches the sky. Of course not. Reeds are working overtime. The photo op draws a midday crowd including Old Kong, who arrives with a bamboo canister of powdered indigo and an idea. A limited run of frontier blue work shirts dyed with his plant extract, then finished in your smoke-free cauldron so the color locks tight. Indigo shirts rarely stain, he claims, and lice despise the odor. Mainstream fact backs him partially. Indigo's insect-repellent properties show up in 18th-century ship logs, but textile historians still argue whether frontier dyers used the plant for comfort or simple fashion. Kong proposes a proof. Sell 10 shirts to telegraph linemen who dangle from trees all day. If they return unstained and unbitten, demand will bloom. You shake hands. Another side venture born under soap's umbrella. Afternoon slides in warm and lazy, but the ledger refuses naps. A delegation from the fledgling infirmary committee stops by seeking steady linen service. 50 sheets a week, washed hotter than a politician's seat. They can pay only in promissory notes backed by the health board stipend arriving next quarter. You weigh possibilities. Soap certificates already circulate like gossip. Why not accept medical scrip? Maylene sketches a quick contract. You'll launder at cost until funding lands, but the infirmary must house a reed bed runoff filter you'll design. Committee signs, minds blown at the notion illness management might sprout green leaves. Environmental historians of the 20th century later dub it integrated healthcare ecology, while skeptics snicker, laundry's pet swamp. As the sun tips west, telegraph wires thrum with a new rumor. Engineers plan to extend the line south toward Stockton, bypassing Hangtown unless right-of-way tariffs drop. Losing those humming strands would snuff your real-time disease alerts. You draft a counterproposal faster than dividend can but a fence. Free laundry for wire crews plus seed oil heater prototypes for their pole climbing camps, in exchange for routing the extension through town. The reply clicks back. Deal. Stop. Biscuits extra. Penniman, overhearing, slaps your back so hard you nearly drop a tray of soap molds. He knows foot traffic past his iron Leviathan just doubled. Evening glow paints the storefronts honey orange when a lanky newspaperman strides up, fresh off the stage from San Francisco. He's chasing the soap currency legend he's heard secondhand. You start to explain, but he waves a dismissive hand. Numbers bore readers. He wants color. Fine. You show him the goat. Dividend headbutts his notepad. Then you produce a squirrel certificate, tip it so the rice grain character flashes, and finally point at the reed bed behind the chimney, roots shimmering like green tassels in dusky light. He scribbles furiously, christening you, the Suds Syndicate of Hangtown, and poses one last question. What keeps counterfeiters 2 valleys over from copying you tomorrow? You grin, reach into the caution box, and fish out a counterfeit fleck of mica. They can copy sparkle, you say, but they can't copy trust. That boils out in the first rinse. The newspaperman pauses, pen in midair, then underlines something 3 times. Historians will later dig up his article and disagree whether the quote was apocryphal. You'll remember his grin was real. Night settles soft as wrung flannel. Penniman locks his regulators. Maylene strums a lullaby on her borrowed harmonica, and the telegraph key clicks occasional updates from Big Cedar. No new deaths, soap holding. You finish the day's tally beside the Redwood sanitation plaque. 43 hospital sheets promised. 10 indigo shirts dyed and drying. 12 new certificates in circulation. 0 boiler mishaps. Dividend bleats approval, still chewing the night leaves behind a silver drizzle. And by first light the pine-clad slopes above Hangtown sweat fog that curls through alleyways like polite ghosts searching for breakfast. You blink sleep from your eyes, shiver at the smell of wet cedar, and find Dividend peering through the half-open door, beard slick with dew and mischief. Somewhere up the ridge a telegraph crew clangs iron cleats against fresh-peeled logging poles. A reminder that wires, like rumors, are never entirely finished in this valley. You pour seed oil into the heater, coax a thin blue flame, and listen to Beaufort's drum give a pleased metallic yawn. The partnership with Penniman has steadied into rhythm. His lightning laundry handles bulk canvas and minor trousers during daylight, while your reed-filtered cauldrons keep the doctor's whites, the infirmary sheets, and anything requiring a conscience. Some citizens call the two shops the twin lungs of Hangtown, one breathing steam, the other breathing scent of camellia and chestnut. You prefer a simpler metaphor, two paddles rowing the same mudboat. Mid-morning brings a crisis as predictable as sunrise. Widow's Spur reports its creek has turned the color of spoiled milk. Telegraphed blame darts toward a logging flume burst upriver, dumping sawdust thick enough to choke trout and, worse, to clog every washboard in town. A mainstream historical note you mutter while stomping toward the stable. Early 1850s lumber companies often built quick and dirty splash dams that collapsed under snowmelt, but newspapers rarely mention the ecological fallout. Whether from oversight or powerful timber lobbies, historians still debate. You cuss under your breath and fetch a mule anyway. At Widow's Spur you find water more porridge than wet. You scoop a mason jar, shake, it froths like root beer. Miners stand ankle-deep, holding shirts that already smell sour. You instruct them to shovel sawdust into windrows so it can compost instead of drifting further. Then hand out emergency leaflets on sand and gravel filters scrawled from yesterday's reed designs. One miner gawks, says, "That's woman's work." You reply, "So is dying of cholera if you're not careful." And he grabs a shovel. Academic papers a century later will cite community-level biofiltration initiatives here. You'll remember only mud in your boots and gratitude for hot biscuits after. Back in Hangtown, Kong waits with a saddlebag of indigo shirts returned from telegraph linemen. No rips, no lice, stains dulled to a pretty storm cloud blue. Success tastes like goat milk and profit margins. Kong suggests scaling production. You propose a dye vat heated by Penniman's waste steam. He nods, intrigued. Waste turns to value. A frontier mantra as old as panning tailings for overlooked nuggets. Penniman appears, face sooty but smiling, holding a prototype of a gear-driven wringer powered by the same low-pressure engine you insisted on. He demonstrates. Crank spins, rollers squeeze a blanket almost dry, and not a hint of finger-eating fury. You applaud, already picturing fewer aches in your shoulders. The banker, lingering nearby like mildew, sees applause and sidles over, hinting he might finance production in exchange for a modest stake and exclusive rights to linen from the territorial courthouse. You trade glances with Penniman. Once you'd have jumped. Now you recognize a gilded noose. You thank him, ask for terms in writing, and later feed the unsigned paper to dividend. Fog burns off by noon, revealing wagon ruts that glitter. Someone spilled a pan of dust. Children poke at the streak with sticks, pocketing flecks until a constable waves them on. You chalk that onto your growing list titled Gold Wasted by Bad Luck or Worse Logistics. Modern economists will point to such losses as proof that gold rush efficiency rarely matched its legend. Folklore books claim the ground itself rejected ill-gotten gains. Historians still quarrel over the metaphor. While you copy ledger entries, a thunder of hooves announces the stage from Sacramento, trailed by an experimental mail coach armored in hammered iron plates. The Postal Service's answer to highwaymen. The driver tosses down 2 crates stamped with the seal of the Territorial Health Board. Cotton gauze and sealed glass carboys of alcohol, yours by prior agreement for maintaining the infirmary linens. You crack a carboy. Antiseptic fumes sting, but clean bandages matter more than clear sinuses. Moments later, a scruffy entrepreneur named Felix Python Odener barges in hugging a copper contraption. A portable still he swears can distill creek water into near-pure alcohol in 3 hours, plus bonus lightning whiskey on the side. He wants you to test whether still water removes sawdust tannins before he hawks it upriver. You raise an eyebrow but accept, trading a week's laundry for exclusive rights to sell any medicinal alcohol it produces. This, is how side hustles breed like kittens under a boarding house porch. Evening drifts closer when Maylene, who has spent hours with the infirmary committee, returns carrying a stack of linen inventory charts tall enough to shade a mule. She's beaming. The committee-approved reedbed runoff trenches lined with crushed charcoal and mussel shells. Her own twist on the Miwok elders' teachings. Quirky fact: mussel shells contain calcium carbonate that neutralizes lye. Colonial laundries on the Atlantic coast once sprinkled powdered shell into rinse water. though textbooks mention it only in footnotes. You whistle at the ingenuity. Historians in 2150 will footnote this very moment, still arguing whether knowledge transfer was one-way or braided like a river delta. Night's first stars prick through indigo when the telegraph clicks frantic again. A windstorm in the high pass has felled 3 poles, severing lines between Hangtown and Big Cedar. Communication outage during a fever watch is a rattlesnake in the cradle. Penniman volunteers a mule team. You supply linemen with indigo shirts, camellia soap, and Dividend's milk biscuits for morale. They trot off into the dark, lanterns swinging like fireflies on parade. Hours later, Beaufort's drum spins its last load, and the seed oil flame gutters low. You stretch, brush suds from your elbows, and glance at the sanitation plaque where your margin scribble of yesterday. Clean is a moving target. Now sports sawdust finger. The wind arriving at dawn smells like distant snow and distant trouble. Thin, metallic, a premonition in the back of your throat. You know it before the telegraph taps. Poles up in the pass held through the night, but ice has sheeted the wire and turned it into one long, humming icicle. Messages crawl instead of sprint, syllables stuttering like miners after their third whiskey. Big Cedar can still mutter all clear, but Widow's Spur goes inexplicably silent. You stoke the seed oil heater, decide silence is never neutral news, and draft a supply list that fits in one saddlebag yet bulges with possibility. A dozen carbolic bars, Kong blue shirts, reed cuttings, and 2 coils of fine copper wire borrowed off the lineman cache. Penniman volunteers his fastest mule, an ornery dun named Dividend 2, in honor or mockery of your goat, hard to say. You ride out before sun crests fully, cauldron fumes still clinging to your coat like second thoughts. Maylene stays behind to pilot the shops, armed with Beaufort's drum, Kang's dye vat, and the new low-pressure wringer whose rollers gleam with fresh beeswax. Return before dusk, she calls, slipping a harmonica into your pocket. Storm sings lonely songs. The trail south is a frozen zipper. At ridgetop you dismount, wrap copper wire around 2 shattered insulators, and give the line a prayerful tug. Tension hums back, faint but alive. Below, Widow's Spur sprawls like a sleeping mining anthill dusted white. Yet the creek, once milk-thick with sawdust, now runs clear as gin too clear. You taste the water. Sharp, cold, oddly sweet. Remember Pye-Tin's portable still? His lightning whiskey operation must be dumping sugary mash upstream, feeding yeast and stripping oxygen. A new hazard. You find the camp's foreman, eyes red as campfire embers, trying to melt snow for drinking. Fever hasn't struck, but miners complain of gut cramps. A barrel of half-fermented, creek beer bubbles near the sluice. You unpack your bars, lecture on charcoal filtration. Yes, it's more exciting than dysentery. And rig reed and sand filter 2.0 using spare flume boards. A mainstream fact drifts across your mind like wood smoke. 19th century distilleries often poisoned local wells with dregs. Historians still fuss over whether it was ignorance or indifference. Right here, it feels like both. By noon, you've traded soap and filter plans for 12 sacks of mash to haul back. Pye-Tin can refine it properly, reduce spillage, maybe invent a market for laundry-grade neutral spirit. Academic food historians 2 centuries on will write papers about frontier biocircularity and cite Widow's Spur as a microcase. They'll miss the part where you also confiscate a fiddle soaked in mash. Strings gummy, but salvageable for silencing boredom on long rides. Ride back, sleet needling your cheeks, Dividend 2 snorting complaints in mule Morse. Halfway the wire above begins singing, ice cracking loose in silver slivers. You test the sound against the pocket harmonica, notes almost match. You blow a reply and swear the wire answers a bar later. Somewhere Maylene is probably laughing at the accidental duet. Approaching Hangtown, you notice fresh bunting flapping across storefronts, red calico and pine boughs. Penniman meets you, face lit by more than steam glow. The territorial fair has sent word it will detour through town en route to Sacramento, judging technological marvels and community innovations. That means 2 things. 1, his lightning laundry must perform flawlessly in front of big city dignitaries. 2, your soap currency and reed filters just made the main event roster. The fair is 5 days off. Preparations ignite like shavings in a forge. Penniman tweaks valve tolerances. You triple seed oil production with Kang's help, and Maylene corrals kids into rehearsing a Suds symphony, banging empty copper basins in time to her harmonica. The banker, sensing headlines, offers sponsorship if his name tops the event banner. You counter that goat milk biscuits outsell his script 4-1. Banner stays neutral. He sulks but writes a check. An actual printed check, shimmering gold ink. Rare as snow in July. Economists later cite it as proof formal banking capitulated to soap-backed goodwill. Economists love tidy morals. You just cash the paper and buy more reed seed. On day 3, the health board plaque succumbs to humility. A nail loosens, wood tilts, bare emblem looking seasick. You take it down, sand off smoke glaze, and struck by whimsy, add a blue indigo neckerchief around the bear's carved throat. Kong approves. Scholars in art history will later argue over subversive symbolism. The plaque goes back up straighter than a telegraph pole. That evening, Paitin rolls in wielding the salvaged mash like a triumphal flag. His portable still coughs out a first clear stream that smells faintly of apples and rebellion. You test a thimbleful fiery, but it combusts blue with almost no soot. Perfect for flame-sterilizing infirmary tools. Dr. Peabody nearly weeps. Paitin names it Hangtown Spirit, slaps a turtle emblem on the keg, and pre-sells 24 bottles to stage-line guards who appreciate a disinfectant that doubles as courage. Historians will argue whether frontier pharmacopoeia blurred lines or simply erased them. Fair Eve dawn arrives crisp, telegraph wires thrumming good weather. The town squares its shoulders. Even the goat sports a ribbon. Commissioners roll in on varnished wagons, breathing cold admiration. First stop, lightning laundry. Penniman cranks levers, steam whispers polite, and 40 shirts exit smoother than a politician's handshake. Applause crackles. But then one commissioner points to the smokestack. No soot, but a faint sugary whiff. Turns out Penniman used Paitin's mash for boiler priming, not realizing fermented vapor smells like bakery gone rogue. Laughs all around. Crisis dodged. Next they tour your reed beds. Roots glisten, reeds wave, water trickles clear. You invite the youngest commissioner to sip. She hesitates, tastes, smiles. Quirky sidebar. NASA scientists in 1978 will replicate similar reed charcoal systems for closed-loop life pods, citing primitive Californian prototypes. Doesn't help you now, but trivia warms like goat milk cocoa. Finally, center stage, the soap currency exhibit. Maylene unveils linen-lined trays of squirrel certificates while a local kid demonstrates the rice grain watermark under magnifying glass. Deputies pass counterfeits that crumble upon wetting. Authentic notes shrug off the splash. Commissioners nod. Bankers frown. Miners beam pride. Academic future fights will question whether soap-backed script truly stabilized prices or just added perfume to the chaos. Standing there, smelling camellia, you think, stability is as stability does. Judgment delivered at sunset. A firing pistol pop of applause. Hangtown awarded blue ribbon for integrated civil sanitation. Penniman's machine earns honorable mention for safe mechanical innovation. And Kang's indigo shirts snag practical aesthetic. You thank everyone, from telegraph crew to dividend who tries to eat the ribbon, then hoist a toast of diluted Hangtown Spirit, cut with reed-filtered water, of course. Night settles, sky brimming with unfamiliar stars shepherding dignitaries' wagons down canyon roads. You, Maylene, Penniman, Kong, and Beaufort sit on overturned tubs, sharing apple-firing whiskey and picking sawdust from boot seams. Someone starts the harmonica. Kids bang basins. The wires above answer like distant banjos. Tomorrow, no ribbon will keep flume dams from bursting. No plaque will keep fever away forever. But for tonight the laundry flickers warm, reed roots drink deep, and the goat curls at the doorstep like a contented comma in the long sentence of your story. You close your eyes, letting seed oil smoke trace gentle shapes on the rafters, and remind yourself that soap, when wielded stubbornly enough, can polish more than cloth. It can polish the rough edges of a whole unruly town. You wake to a hush so complete it feels staged. as if Hangtown itself has paused to take a bow after the fair. Sunrise reveals a town washed softer by pride. Pennants still flutter, but the brass band has gone. Dignitaries have rattled downhill, and yesterday's blue ribbons hang like quiet medals on porch rails. For the first dawn in months, nobody lines up with an emergency bundle. Your slate of orders stands gloriously blank. You stretch, half expecting Moby Tub to clamor for wood. But the seed oil heater just blinks a sleepy ember. Maylene sits cross-legged by the reed bed, trimming brown stalks into compost. Penniman snores on a cot strung between boiler pipes. Kong rearranges indigo cakes in the shade. Dividend the goat curls near the doorway, chin on the sanitation plaque, ribbons still drooping from one horn. All of them calm, for once, and you feel the rare, weightless tug of possibility. With the fair behind you, what now? First you count coins from soap sales, dust fees, 2 banker checks, 56 squirrel certificates returned for laundering credit. Enough to replace the warped roof beam, buy a second drum, maybe even take a week off. But enough is slippery on the frontier. A mainstream fact echoes from some newspaper clipping. By 1854, half the original 49ers had left California, pockets lighter, dreams heavier, chasing newer booms in Australia or British Columbia. Laundrymen, less documented, often folded tubs and followed. Historians debate the numbers. One census suggests 20% drifted north. Another insists most stayed, content to scrub where gold refused to shine. Truth, as always, probably rinsed out somewhere between spreadsheets and campfire stories. With ledger balanced, you walk Main Street, greeting shopkeepers mending Fair Week dents. The banker tips his hat, genuine this time, and confesses your soap certificates now pass hand to hand even in Placerville, forcing him to print lower denomination notes. Progress, he sighs, tastes suspiciously like cinnamon steam. Over coffee at the boarding house, he offers to buy your operation outright. A tidy sum, a promise of pension, a clause letting you keep dividend. You decline, for now, blaming sentimental mud in your veins. Back at the shack, telegraph wires hum steady. No fever, no burst dams. Beaufort suggests you lock the door and fish the creek while peace lasts. Kong argues for planting another reed bed before autumn floods. Penniman waves a pamphlet touting steam-powered laundromats in San Francisco, bigger than warehouses, itching for experienced partners. Each option flickers like a card halfway turned. You picture yourself 20 miles upriver, prospecting your own claim, wrists raw but mind quiet, or on a city pier, overseeing iron leviathans while clerks juggle spreadsheets, or simply staying. Teaching apprentices, letting reeds knit a permanent green border around the tub that started it all. Out of nowhere the goat sneezes, jostling a stack of unsent indigo shirts. A single envelope tumbles free, yesterday's fair committee invitation to demonstrate at Sacramento in spring. You crack a grin, future knocking with blue-dyed knuckles. Decision makes itself, quiet and certain. You'll stay the winter, ride to Sacramento come thaw, and see what the city's steam and politics can offer. Prospecting can wait. Gold dust is fickle, but cloth never stops needing care. You call a meeting under the awning, fetch mugs of watered Hangtown spirit, and pitch the plan, seasonal roadshow, licensing indigo, teaching reed filtration, maybe franchising soap across stagecoach routes. The team nods, wide-eyed, and even Penniman admits a traveling clean machine and sud school could outshine any static boiler. Evening settles, last one before preparations start. You inventory tubs, oil gears, pack demonstration kits, and carve a fresh turtle stamp for certificates, new city, new batch, same spirit. Before sleep, you step outside and look back. Chimney whispering sweet steam, reeds rustling, telegraph wire twanging a lullaby, goat chewing ribbon fringe into confetti. You feel gratitude heavy as wet wool and just as warm. Later, curled on your cot, you jot one last note in the caution box. Dim the lamps until they glow the faintest amber, and imagine yourself stretched beside a dying campfire while the distant creek lowers its voice to a slow lullaby. The air carries a soft sweetness, part reed, part lingering soap, settling over your shoulders like the thinnest quilt. All the hammers, boilers, and telegraph clicks are quiet now. Let your breathing follow the barely audible beat of the wires. Tap, tap, pause, folding the clamor of daylight into tiny envelopes and tossing them, one by one, into the coals. Each ember blooms a mild halo, as though someone across the years is tucking the blanket higher around your chest. You are no longer the you who slogged through mud to chase deadlines, nor the you who argued steam pressure with stubborn pistons. For this moment you are simply one bright bubble inside the universe's great washing barrel, light, weightless, made of nothing but shimmer. Any dream that surfaces can drift off on the next slow churn. You are free to float, no decisions required. Beyond the window, reeds hiss in the night breeze, and a wooden sign creaks on its hook, offering a gentle reminder. Tomorrow's wrinkles will still be there. There's time enough to press them smooth. For now, let the world fade behind the hush of water seeping over stones, and picture each star overhead blinking out its lantern as the sky closes shop. Breathe once more, long and even, and feel yourself glide onto the softest shore of sleep. You have arrived. The ledger is closed, the tub is empty, and the night is yours.